Board of Education meeting for Monday, March 14th. Roll call, please.
Espino,
Present.
Lang,
Present.
Mencia,
Present.
Petrielli present, Reed,
Present.
Sager,
Present.
and Schumacher. And she's absent. Okay.
Before we go to the board, before we go to the Pledge of Allegiance, I want to make a quick announcement. In the agenda at the top, it says that the meeting will be held in person. Based on the governor's most recent mandate, all employees will be required to wear a mask regardless of vaccine status. That was put out there in error. We are sorry about that. We have since removed that. When the agenda gets created, sometimes we copy and paste from the previous month, and that was there. So we are sorry about that. Masks are not required. With that, I'll ask everyone to stand, and I need our Claremont students to help us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Can you start us? So now we are on to the comments and suggestions from the public. Do we have anybody coming up to speak? Okay, so since we have someone comment, I have something I have to read beforehand. This is the point of the meeting where we welcome public comments. If you wish to address the board, please sign in. Although comments may be made on almost any matter related to the operation of schools, comments will not be allowed concerning individual students or staff members. Any comments related to individual students or staff should be addressed in private with the superintendent. As a reminder, this meeting is being video live streamed on YouTube. The video of the meeting will also be archived and available for viewing after the meeting has adjourned. For those sharing a public comment, please be mindful that you are being broadcast live and your comment will also be included in the video archive. Please limit your individual comments to 30 minutes. A board member will serve as timekeeper and will give the speaker notice when there are 30 seconds remaining to allow the speaker time to complete or summarize their thoughts. The board's attorney has advised the board to maintain a consistent rule regarding the length of time an individual may address the Board of Education. Doing so safeguards the freedoms of speech rights of each speaker to be treated equally. If one person is granted additional time, then all speakers henceforth will need to be treated similarly. This is a business meeting of the Board of Education, and the board must conduct its business in public and must complete that business in a timely manner. If you wish to provide written comments to the board, they will be included in the meeting minutes. Such meetings are not held for public discussion. While it is the practice of the board not to respond to public questions or comments during the board meeting, board members do listen attentively and carefully and consider your thoughts and topics you present.
And the time for public comment is 3 minutes,
What
just
I
to
say?
clarify.
What did I say? Did I say
Maybe 30.
Long day of meetings already. Sorry about that. Janet Diaz?
Good evening. I'm a parent of a student at Grove Middle School and also Salt Creek Elementary School, and then also I have one that will be eventually going to Salt Creek and Grove. I'm here speaking because of some problems with cell phone use at school, specifically the junior highs. Thank you to some of the board members who have replied to my emails. My plan was to come last month and speak, but you guys were a little busy. So I decided to wait a little bit longer, and also I know the superintendent and assistant superintendent, you guys also have responded. I've had conversation with Mr. Harrington as well. Let's see, it's my understanding that the students used to keep their cell phones in their lockers. So my question is, why did this change? Many of us feel as though the policy should be back in place. Right now, the policy is that they're supposed to be put away. This does not happen. I know that they use them during passing periods, they use them during lunch, and at times in class. Several people have said students keep them on their desks, as well as use them during the entire lunch period. This is a distraction for other students, as well as teachers. And during lunch, this also prevents them from doing the socializing face-to-face, which a lot of us were concerned with during the e-learning during that period. Also, many fights, which I also hear is a concern at Grove as well, are started or followed through because of communication during school. I've also heard from a teacher that parents as well are texting their children when they're in school. An example being that once there was an ambulance outside and it turned into sort of a rumor that something more serious was occurring. Also, cell phones pose a privacy issue with video and pictures being taken of others without their consent, where I haven't had a direct impact on that, thankfully, with my daughter. It can definitely happen. I do not see any positive reason they should be allowed to carry them around. It is in the parent-student handbook that students may use the classroom phone to contact parents if need be. Parents are able to contact the office to relay messages, as well as in case of an emergency. And finally, parents can send a message to their child's phone and they will see it at the end of the day if they're kept in their lockers. Students are at school to learn. They have Chromebooks if they need to look something up or use it as a reward time from teachers to listen to music or play on a school-related website. I'm asking
30
that
seconds.
the board just considers this at the junior high level, requires phones to be put into lockers and have consequences if they are not doing this. And we have to remember that we're in charge of our students' success. The students may be upset with this change, but we are here to teach them and guide them. And in the end, more will be accomplished and more students will learn to socialize face-to-face instead of on the other side of a phone. So please just consider revisiting this policy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else come to speak before the board? So I guess, Tom, you have to follow the students and public. Oh, no, we got Katie. So item 6 point. Yeah. Yes. Item 6.0, COVID-19 Dashboard.
All right, well, it's impossible to follow the Talent Show Act, but I do have some good news to share this evening. Our COVID update is very different from the last few COVID updates we had. Over the last week, we've had 1 student positive case, 1 student quarantine, 1 staff case, and 0 staff quarantines. Over the time since winter break, we've had a total of 478 student cases, 55 staff cases, and 775 quarantines. And we continue to have no confirmed internal transmission of COVID-19.
Kind of a question, what percentage of kids are wearing masks in the classroom, do we think, right about now? Is it vary from school to school? Is it?
It does vary, and that is would be very difficult to track, so I don't have an exact percentage. I know many continue to wear them, and many have chosen to take them off, and it was a fairly smooth transition for the change.
I was in 2 schools this week, and I would say a majority of the kids had masks on. Even when they were performing, they had masks on.
Really?
Yeah.
And our kids are responding well, we're not having any sort of issues, right?
No, we
Except for the cell phone usage?
we prepared lessons for the entire district to go over everybody's individual choices and how we can advocate for ourselves and make our own choices, and it seems to have been very successful. We've seen very little issues.
Any questions or comments? Item 6.0, MTSS, I'm assuming that's you as well?
Yes, it is. And I'm going to invite Tricia Sunny up to present with me this evening. Tricia is the coordinator of MTSS and assessment. No problem. We'll get started. All right. Well, we are very excited this evening to present an overview of the multi-tiered system of support in District 59. First, I want to start with a quick overview of our department. My name is Dr. Katie Ossel. I'm the Assistant Superintendent for Student Services and Assessment. And in our department, we have three main areas that are designed to help identify and meet the needs of diverse learners. Thank you, Ben. Those areas are educational services, which serve our students with IEPs and 504s or health plans. Social emotional learning, which is focused on SEL, community building, relationship building, behavior intervention, and cultural responsiveness. And MTSS, which is focused on using data to make informed decisions about students' instruction and intervention and supporting their various needs. So to start us off, Tricia will lead us with a definition of MTSS.
Absolutely. So MTSS is a framework that districts use to ensure that we have multiple tiers or levels of instruction and support to meet the needs of all of our students. I think often the first thing that comes to mind when you think of MTSS is intervention. And while response to intervention, or RTI, is absolutely a critical component of MTSS, a successful multi-tiered system of support also heavily relies on an effective core curriculum to ensure that that alone meets the needs of the grand majority of our students. Effective ways to identify students who might be in need of something more or different than just that core. Ways to design, document, implement, and evaluate those plans. Ways to ensure we're meeting the SEL and behavioral needs of our students. A comprehensive assessment system to inform decisions throughout. And it also requires productive and positive relationships with our community resources and families. If you were to Google MTSS, an image that is often affiliated with various definitions is an umbrella. And while that umbrella visual is an oldie, I do feel it does a nice job of kind of displaying that a multi-tiered system of support really does umbrella all we do on behalf of kids.
So I'm going to start with a very common model of a multi-tiered system of support, which is the triangle or the pyramid model. And this demonstrates how we serve at different levels. So with this green triangle here, you see a representation of tier 1, which is universal instruction. It's the instruction that we provide to all students overall. Layered on top of that, for some students, we have tier 2 group intervention. So you can see that that triangle is on top of the green triangle because we always try to layer supplemental intervention instead of replacing the core instruction. That's how we begin to close achievement gaps and make sure our students are catching up with their needs and can stay on track with that core or universal instruction. Now, for very few students, we will also need individualized intervention. So that's what we would consider tier 3 intervention. And in a healthy system that is functioning properly and has all pieces in place, we hope to see that 80% of students have their needs met within the core, that green triangle, tier 1 universal instruction, that about 15% of kids need a second layer of intervention with tier 2, and that 5% or less would need that individualized tier 3 intervention. Now, I also show here a second model, which is the model that we are striving for, that looks more like a diamond. And you can see on one side, we have the green, yellow, and red layered interventions. And on the other, we have a blue and a little purple triangle in there, which would represent acceleration and enrichment. So we are working this year to have a more formalized process of acceleration, enrichment, and TDP represented within our multi-tiered system of support.
Can I ask a couple of clarifying questions on this?
Sure.
Thanks. So can you explain to us a little bit, just for our own education, of where those numbers come from of the 80% tier 1, tier 2, 15, and then the less than 5?
Sure. In short, that really comes from the standard deviation in the bell curve of understanding that students will fall at different areas, and the majority of students would fall in having their needs met by the core. So the majority of students should be able to have those needs met with our universal instruction, with our choices in curricular resources, and with the instruction that we would provide to all. Now, when we look at that bell curve, we have some that fall outside of that large middle area, either on one side or the other, needing intervention or being able to accelerate or enrich. So that's essentially where it comes from. Trisha, do you want to expand on that at all?
I guess I would just add that a lot of research behind evaluating the effectiveness of a lot of things is looking for the impact on the critical mass, which is often defined as that 80%. So if something is as effective as it should be, you would expect that at least 80% of the population respond as expected.
I appreciate that. And then just one small other clarifying question, which is the purple triangle. I'm just curious because it may just be that I'm not familiar with it, but I've never heard of our TDP students or accelerated group getting one-on-one instruction versus group instruction. So I just wanted to clarify if we do individualized instruction for advanced students.
So we differentiate at all levels, which can be individualized in some way, shape, or form. I think our work right now and our goal is to really figure out how that model looks for all of those pieces, acceleration, enrichment, and TDP. So this is just an idea of what we may come up with as we do that research and really formalize our process. And then that arrow in the middle demonstrates that students in a multi-tiered system of support need to move fluidly between the tiers. So as needs change in one area or another, we may layer on more intervention or remove or fade intervention as needed for individuals or for groups. In order to do this work, we have to have very strong systems of assessment so that we can determine the needs of our students. So our systems of assessment help us to monitor the health of our system. We use iReady diagnostics to let us know where students are and what their needs may be. And we can additionally administer FastBridge to students to get even more detail on areas of domains or areas of need for students or areas of strength. We also utilize panorama surveys to help measure social and emotional progress of students and areas of need. So these universal assessments set us up to make sure that we are making appropriate decisions on what types of intervention student may have, who's responding to the core, and who may need more. The way that we do that work is by taking all of our assessment data and moving it into a system that's called Branching Minds. And Branching Minds helps us to organize the data for different content areas. So what you see here is a representation of a Branching Minds screen that has many students listed. You can see their initials. And then next to their student name, it demonstrates in a content area what tier of instruction or intervention would be best for them based on their assessment data. We utilize that data paired with what we know about students, what we see every day, and other data points to determine if that's the appropriate tier for instruction or intervention, or if it needs to be adjusted. And that work is done within our grade level or content area team meetings. So we have opportunities in all of our schools for collaboration between teachers in which they use their assessment data, their observations, their anecdotal data, and Branching Minds to help confirm or adjust tier levels as needed, and then to begin to design the appropriate instructional plans for students, whether that be all students, groups of students, or individuals. Our Tier 1 core instruction is chosen through our curriculum review process and is all based on our Common Core state standards. So our lesson structures at the core all offer opportunities for differentiation and for support of students. So students do not need to be recommended for Tier 2 or Tier 3 to get differentiated and supported instruction, but when recommended would receive additional intervention. Tricia, do you want to talk a little more about Tier 1?
Sure. So as Katie mentioned, Tier 1 is the resources and instruction that is delivered to all of our students, regardless of whether they are also identified as needing something more or different. So buildings develop their own master schedules based on their enrollment, the programming that they house, and ensure that there's appropriate time allocated to each of those core subject areas for teachers to successfully deliver the core lesson structures. In the center there, you can see a list of our main subject area core resources, some which are under review. And then all of our Tier 1 instruction is delivered by our classroom staff.
So that moves us into Tier 2 group intervention, which is for some students. This is the yellow triangle that we saw layered on top of the green. So for group intervention, teams use our assessment data paired with that anecdotal data, what they are seeing from students, to organize students into groups that have common skill needs. The intent is to supplement the core instruction, so to boost those skills that are needed for students to be able to respond successfully to the universal core instruction. And with those groups, we are able to monitor progress by taking data weekly, and then we look at that data every 6 to 8 weeks to determine if the group is making progress, if there are outliers, and if anything needs to be adjusted.
So Tier 2, by definition, should be short-term and preventative in nature. So in order to do that most effectively, we want to provide that within small groups of students who have common needs. And it has a very flexible delivery model. Tier 2 can be delivered within the core classroom. It could be a pull-out model. And then in grades 3 through 5, we have a math win structure that a lot of intervention also occurs. The district has a universal menu of resources that can support Tier 2 intervention that's available across the district for reading, math, behavior, and SEL, and we're always evaluating the impact of those resources and identifying any new gaps and considering the need for more if necessary. Because of that flexible delivery model, really anyone can deliver Tier 2 intervention. It could be delivered by a teacher, many are delivered by an interventionist, or it could be an ESP under the supervision of a certified staff member. And of course, parents are partners in that process by supporting at home and being updated with their evaluation.
And that brings us to Tier 3, Individualized Intervention. So those are those few students who need a more intensive plan to close the gap. Students are referred to Tier 3 if we see that within their Tier 2 group intervention, they are not making adequate progress, and we've made several adjustments and we're still not seeing the progress that we would expect. Within Tier 3, we have a problem-solving team that helps to make decisions about what the intervention can and should look like. And the intent is to provide individualized and explicit instruction on a very targeted skill. That student's progress is then monitored, much like in Tier 2, and evaluated every 6 to 8 weeks to ensure that they are making progress.
So the word that is always connected to Tier 3 is individualized. So in terms of the logistics, it is just that as well. A lot of the when depends on the individual needs of the plan that was designed by the problem-solving team, how that fits into the student's schedule. It could be, we do have resources that use alternative instructional approaches that we might be accessing during this time, or it could be environmental factors of bringing it to one-on-one, additional time, layering of Tier 2 approaches. But most often you will find Tier 3 intervention plans are delivered by an interventionist, and parents are a partner and always encouraged to participate in that problem-solving process as well.
Okay, so up until this point, we've really talked about student needs, whether that is all students, some students, or few students. Another very, very important part of our multi-tiered system of support in District 59 is our system level work. This is where we analyze how our full systems are working as a district. We have a district MTSS team that meets weekly, that comes together to adjust and make plans and make decisions based on the data that we have. So Trisha's going to talk through several reports that we take a look at regularly to analyze our progress, and these are the reports that help us make decisions and adjustments along the way as a district.
So the first report you see here is one that's available within Branching Minds, and what it does is take our student assessment data and puts it into the RTI triangle of how many students are being recommended for their needs being supported just through Tier 1, who may need Tier 2 and Tier 3. And it allows us to compare that breakdown over two dates and time. So what this allows us to do is see how close or far we are from that goal of having 80% of our students within that average range, and whether the comparison of the two dates is moving in the right direction. This report, also available in Branching Minds, houses all of our behavior discipline data. So it allows us to look for patterns, outliers, and trends at the building and district level so that we can be as responsive and proactive as possible. this particular report considers both achievement and growth data. You can see the one has multiple dots representing all of our schools, and the other side multiple dots representing all of our grade levels, and it places, when considering achievement and growth, into the 4 quadrants. So we can see whether our schools or grade levels are being categorized as having high achievement and high growth, or perhaps not quite at that 80% of students within the average range, but having high growth on their way there. High achievement, low growth, or low achievement, low growth. And this report, again, also available in Branching Minds, is the intervention usage report. So it not only allows us to have a system level view of which intervention resources our students are accessing, but it also breaks it down by tiers so we can ensure that we are best aligning our resources to where the student needs are.
So the role of the multi-tiered system of support is truly for us to take data at any level and use that to adjust our instructional moves and our plans as administrators, as leaders, and as teachers to best support the diverse needs of the students. In order to do that, we have a lot of support structures that have supported that multi-tiered system of support and supported our staff in that work. One of the structures is our synergy teams at our buildings. So we have a team of staff members that consists of administrators, instructional coaches, psychologists, and service providers that regularly come together to lead our teachers in this work and to facilitate conversations that result in database decisions. We also provide professional learning in our synergy workshops, where we bring those teams from all the buildings together. And we provide facilitator moves or professional development on that data analysis that they can then bring back to their buildings and work through with their grade level or content area teams. We have regular job-alike meetings. For example, we bring interventionists together very regularly to talk about those new resources for intervention for Tier 2 or for Tier 3, and to provide professional development that can assist them in that process. And all of this is moving us toward our key performance indicator for strategic plan goal 2, the inclusive learning environment. That KPI is that all students whose needs fall outside of the universal core curriculum will achieve expected growth based on individual measures, or that we will continue with the problem-solving process that's documented within MTSS. So essentially what we are working toward in this district is that all students who need more than our core will be supported in a way that allows them to make progress. And that will be our goal for the length of the strategic plan. Right now we're taking a lot of baseline data and trying to gather exactly where we are with our interventions so that we can continue that work in a very strategic way and continue to report out on it. We have several next steps, many things that are already in the works and many things that we are focused on next. One of those is continuing to review and study our data at every opportunity that we can so that we can make those district level adjustments, modify, and make improvements in our actions as a district. We are continuing to improve core and universal curriculum, which the stronger our core gets, the less intervention need there will be. And so we continue that through the curriculum review process and implementation process. We are working hard to expand our Tier 3 resource options for literacy, math, and behavior, and continue to round out those menus of resources that we have at each building. As I stated earlier, we are formalizing enrichment, acceleration, and TDP to be part of our more comprehensive multi-tiered system of support. We have those opportunities, but again, we want that all in one place and as part of one system and structure. We are continuing to research and improve the intervention process specifically for dual language and looking at potential resources. And we are reviewing equitable distribution of interventionists based on needs, which we always try to look at where are our highest needs and how are we best supporting them. So those are just a few of our next steps that will assist us in working towards that key performance indicator and our strategic plan goal. So that is our overview of MTSS. Questions?
Go ahead, Joe.
Instruction, what happens when they fail to make progress? What's the next step?
Yes, when we don't see progress with individualized intervention over time, we first would modify and adjust. If we continue to not see adequate progress, it's a possibility that there may be a disability at play, and that's when we may open an evaluation for disabilities and IEP status. If we find that a student does have a disability that adversely affects their ability to achieve in the school setting, then they may qualify for an individualized education plan, in which we would write that based on their present levels of performance, their needs, then define services, and then define placement.
So for the rest of the board members, I know Randy and I had a meeting just about this, right? This is before you get to the IEP level, right?
Yes.
Okay. So one of my questions is, when you have the Tier 3 instruction that's very individualized, that's obviously personnel dependent, how do we go about ensuring that we have, the right interventionists at the right schools? Do they travel around the district? How does that work out?
We try to provide some common resources for all of our interventionists that can be used at all schools in terms of Tier 3. That is definitely something that we continue to work on, but you're right, the needs are very individualized, which is why it takes a team to come together and think about what is the area of need, why do we think that's occurring, and then what would be the right approach that we want to try first for that student and see if they make progress. So it's hard to answer because it truly is different for every child. We don't necessarily have interventionists traveling. We more so try to support the interventionist at that building in the delivery of the individualized intervention.
I want to just kind of piggyback off of what Joe said. But if there is a child that there's not a disability, it's behavior that is preventing them from moving forward, what do we put in place for that?
So we also have behavioral interventions. At the Tier 3 level, that often looks like an individualized plan for that child, where we are noting what the expectations are, what consequences will be. We're noting what specific skill we're going to instruct that child in and build upon. And then we have whoever the team is that's working with that child in that plan, instructing in that skill, giving opportunities for practice, opportunities for reinforcement, of course working with the parent in that process, and really working through whatever that individualized plan is. It really is different for every child depending on the behavior, why the behavior is occurring, what barriers may be in the way towards progress, so on and so forth.
So just a question to contextualize, when you talk about in next steps, the expand Tier 3 resources, and then also the formalizing of the TDP and acceleration piece. I recall like a couple of years ago on the board, sort of in the pre-COVID world, that you were developing the MTSS handbook.
Yes.
So is that the idea that those resources would fit into that sort of reference guide?
That's right. Yes.
Okay.
So we have the handbook. It's used regularly, and it notes everything for Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3. What we are hoping to do is now take the information about TDP acceleration enrichment, best practices in decision making and data use for those pieces, and pull that into the handbook as well, so it truly is a more comprehensive continuum.
Awesome. And then that also, I would think with the handbook as a resource, it just gives us confidence that across the district, we're applying these consistently and that we're sharing the wisdom of one school with another school.
Exactly.
Awesome. Thanks.
My question is, I was looking at the common interventions, and one thing I wasn't kind of nice to see was the parent involvement too. So the communication going to the parent, if your child's going to be going in these small groups, there's communication that goes out to the parents at that time. And are they invited in at that time to have a discussion about this at all, or is it kind of, hey, we're going to do this with your student? If we go to Tier 3, they get more involved. Because I know one thing we've kind of had some issues with was communication with the families and stuff like that. So how's that communication work?
Yeah, so we have communication letters that go home that should be paired with an in-person conference or a phone call first to let the parent know of the initiation of the need for intervention. And then as we get together as a team every 68 weeks to evaluate whether the students are responding to the intervention, at a minimum, we should be providing communication if there has been a change to the intervention. But we highly encourage that they provide updates related to the growth that the children are making at least every 6 to 8 weeks. All of our communication should end with an invite to parents, returning with a phone call or requesting a meeting to talk further about it. And then if students do get referred to Tier 3 problem solving, before that occurs, we do let the parents know that this is happening, the date and the time, and that they're welcome to attend as well.
Another question, so how do you get the parents engaged in helping with? Turn it off, sorry. How do we get the parents involved in helping with it? Do we send like support, like documentation home, or like, there's communication that goes home saying, this is how you can help your students, stuff like that? Or is it like a set thing, or is that specialized too, kind of like the tier 2 in training?
It is specialized depending on what the intervention is focused on. In the initial letter and the update letters, there is a section for what you can do at home to support your child's needs. Many of our interventionists also send home, things that they could do home somewhat regular, or do at home somewhat regularly, just to reinforce the learning and apply more practice as well.
Specifically here you have continue to research and improve intervention process for dual language. Which of the assessments that go into the system are in Spanish, for example? Is it math, literature? What do we have?
So for math, the math diagnostic is available in English or Spanish.
At all grade levels?
At all grade levels,
Okay.
K-8. So we have some district defaults based on our current language allocation plan that are pushed out, and then teams are to review and make any adjustments as necessary. As far as reading, right now, the diagnostic is only available in English. iReady has just released this year an assessment of Spanish reading that currently is not adaptive or normed, being the first year. They're collecting a lot of that information, but it is an assessment of reading in Spanish based off of their grade level standards. So what teams are to do is take a look at what Branching Minds is recommending based off of that assessment in English, and then consider what other data sources they have to represent Spanish, to then land on a tier recommendation that represents the student as a reader based on what they're able to show in both. And the hope is the plan is that the assessment of Spanish reading will eventually be fully adaptive in Spanish as well, normed, and have a personalized path of instruction as well.
And then I just had a couple of questions on a couple of the slides. When you had the recommended tier levels, slide 6, what was the triangle with the S in it? I got what 1, 2, and 3 were, right?
Yeah.
What is S?
So S is if a student is receiving IEP services in that area.
Okay, so they've already been identified and have an IEP for that particular content area.
Yes.
Okay. And then on slide 18, what is support delivery fidelity? Not my favorite phrase.
So
I know what fidelity is. I know what support is. I know what delivery is.
So slide 18 is the
If you go-
intervention report, and so
Yeah.
it allows us to see what interventions are being utilized, how they're being utilized. And one of those pieces is that our staff who are implementing intervention also track the fidelity. So were they able to meet with the group? Were they able to meet with the child? Things come up on a day-to-day basis. There are absences. And so it allows us to see if we have actually been able to fulfill that intervention and at what rate.
Is it? So then, are those rates real? Can we go back to slide 18?
I will say that these are outdated as
Okay.
we've had some
So-
changes in the presentation timeline. So I would not count on those as real right now.
I'm just curious because they were, in the 60% range, and that seems low to me if our goal is to reach these students. Or it suggests maybe we need more resources for interventions, or a different way to pull them out, schedule them. Okay, I think I got most of mine.
Any other questions or comments?
Could I just ask for, since you are both up here, and later on we're going to be talking a little bit about schedule changes.
Sure.
You mentioned in the presentation about win time for grades 3 through 5. Could you talk a little bit about that and what that's able to accomplish and why that might be a value to our other grade levels?
Yeah, So we added that extra step in for grades 3 through 5, if you will, because we were looking at our system level data, and where we were falling below the national standard more than in other grade levels was that 3 through 5. So we knew not only were the needs in terms of the amount of kids needing to access intervention beyond what we could do under a typical schedule, so was the need just for more differentiated instruction, period. So what this time in our day allows us to do is really meet all kids where they're at. If they need to dip outside of their current grade level standards, just through some support-like activities, we can do that. If they need to access Tier 2 intervention, we have time protected to do that. If they're ready to handle enrichment or what is beyond their grade level standards, we're able to do that and have protected time, staffing resources, and everything to support that.
And just to clarify, how does that win time relate to our general window for math, for example? Like, is a portion taken out of that general window? Is it added on?
It's added on this year, so that was the other, with having a new math program, we didn't have to impact the fidelity of delivering that core lesson structure by adjusting other things to really protect that time, to allow teachers to not only teach into those priority standards, but allow for students to access instruction in those prerequisite skills if they need as well. And our needs were heaviest in that for 3-5.
And the win time is specifically for math?
Yes.
Okay. Has there been any discussion of?
What's nice about, you thinking reading? Yeah,
Yes.
what's nice about our core lesson structure for reading is we already have an hour of our elementary day for just that. So guided reading is that we meet kids right where they are. If they need Tier 2 intervention, it can occur then. Otherwise, we group students based off where they're at.
And I would add that that is an outcome of that system level work. So when our instructional leaders and our MTSS staff come together at the district level to look at our data and identify, while we have a large need with a lot of students at this certain grade level, how can we adjust next year to make sure that we're meeting that need? That was one of the pieces from last winter that we started reviewing and really diving into and digging into the data to see what was going on there and how could we adjust going forward, and then created a system level adjustment for grades 3 through 5 as a result.
And that correlation to what you saw is to continue to improve the core. Because until we get to that 80%, we are going to need a greater amount of interventions. So we're hoping that the opposite will be true, where we strengthen our core, we are going to have a need for less interventions. So we're really looking at our schedule adjustments to allow for that protected time, as Tricia said, where students aren't pulled out of other subject areas or PE or fine arts to have to sacrifice that time in order to get the interventions that they need, which is, I think, something for right now that we have to really prioritize. And hopefully, as we strengthen our core, we will need that intervention time less in the future.
So we're talking about the K, like 3 through 5 win time. Is there anything for the K through 2? Because I think we're besides the Tier 1, Tier 2, we have win time for the 3 and 5. But what about K through 2? Because I imagine we can identify students that need that extra intervention at an earlier stage.
Yeah.
Besides, is there something else in their schedule for that?
So for reading, it's built in through that guided reading hour. For math, that was not a need that we identified system-wide, but there are definitely buildings who, with the partnership of the district MTSS team, has altered components of their core lesson structure to make sure that they're that they have enough time and resources to differentiate to the level that's needed.
But Randy, to your point, that is something that we are looking at in the schedules for next year to allow that expansion of win time across the board and across multiple content areas. So K2 as well as 6-8.
I think that's all for, I think you may finish. So now we're on to 6.03, the,
Thank you.
Yeah, just before we move on, I thank you for pulling this out. This is
Yes.
important stuff to discuss.
I may have some more questions for you when I really sit down and look at these numbers.
Sure.
But
No problem at all.
I'll send them over spring break for you. How's that sound?
That's great. Thank you.
Well, and again, I think this was an intro to the process and the system. But what our hope is that as we continuously present data to the board, this will make more sense as we pair it with our winter our benchmarking throughout the year, but also then looking at our tiers and looking at our MTSS reports on a regular basis. And now it will make more sense as to what that actually means. Thank you.
6.03, the literacy review update.
Good evening. Wonderful. My name is Alyssa Coker. I am the literacy coordinator for the district, and I brought along Nicole Robinson, our executive director of curriculum and instruction, to talk about, to actually add on to what Katie and Tricia were just speaking about and talking about our core instruction. We're going to take a deep dive into the Curriculum Council focused on literacy tonight. Which way?
Down arrow? There we go. Okay, so a lot of the conversation you were just having with Dr. Ossel and Ms. Senni kind of relate to the discussion about why we pulled together the Curriculum Council focused on literacy. So it's directly related to Strategic Plan Goal 1, which is regarding student growth and achievement. And as you know, our KPI, or key performance indicator in that goal, is that 80% or more of all of our students will demonstrate growth and have their learning needs met by the district's universal core curriculum. And anytime that's not happening, that triggers a curricular review process, which Ms. Savage has presented to you previously. And so in our reviewing our literacy data, we recognized the need for that. So we pulled together this council that specifically looks and is relating to the strategies underneath Goal 1 of readiness, achievement, and growth, curriculum clarity, and also the aligned assessment system.
Wrong way.
There we go.
All right, the Curriculum Council partnered with us in the instruction departments under Susan Savage. Along with Nicole and I, we had Joshua Perdomo and Andrea Cohn from our multilingual department, and Ann Fleming, our science and social science facilitator. We had 19 K-8 teachers, 6 of which were dual language Spanish, 1 dual language Polish, and 12 general ed. We had 3 elementary principals and 1 junior high principal, 2 elementary assistant principals, 2 elementary coaches, 2 junior high coaches, 2 literacy interventionists from the elementary, and you just heard from her, Tricia Senni, our coordinator of assessment and MTSS. So it was a wide range of roles and responsibilities in this council. You know, I think it's upside down, right? We had really to spend some time examining best practices from literacy research and identifying the priority standards, along with creating district literacy belief statements. This happened over about 9 council meetings from the late fall to winter. We just ended a few weeks ago, and we'll go into each of those a little bit more detail for you now.
Okay, so our early learning with the council was focused on just building our collective knowledge around best practices in literacy, the current research, and so we read and analyzed and discussed together several articles and chapters from texts, but really around the urgency of ensuring that students are proficient as readers and writers when they leave our system, right? We looked at best practices and the elements involved in developing literacy communities within our classrooms, and also the components that lead to deep comprehension of text as students progress through foundational skills through deep comprehension. Laura Belchenko, our consultant, also led us through several grounding activities, which were her way of modeling to us best practice lessons based on those standards and just best practice and research, so that we could see it in action.
The second purpose of the council was to take a close look at our Common Core state standards. And we did so by looking at the reading literature standards, the reading informational, our language standards, and our writing standards. And grade level groups looked at those to identify what we call priority standards. And as you see on your screen, that they are a carefully selected subset of those total list of standards. And really, I underline there the greatest emphasis for instruction and assessment. And when we think about our students, we want them to have that shared experience across grades under those priority standards. When we looked at the standards, we did not eliminate any of them, though. We are just saying that these are the ones we want to guarantee students we emphasize in our instruction and that we also will assess. If they weren't identified as a priority standard, they were labeled a supporting standard. And those supporting standards will just live in the context of a priority standard. This process was done in grade level groups where we talked with Laura Belchenko, and she gave us some advice on how to look at the standards and how they progress through the grade levels. In the reading, we had some guaranteed priority standards of 1 and 10, and I'll show you a snapshot in a second here. And then grade levels started to dive in to see which ones should be priority for their grade level. And there was a nice moment, I think it was our second time into it, and we're really getting into the groove, and all of a sudden the second grade teachers were turning up to the third grade teachers, and there's that vertical dialogue. The junior high teams were all of a sudden at one table and having those conversations to see, okay, so you're saying that in 7th grade, what does that mean for us in 8th grade? And then we would come back the next day, and maybe Laura Belchenko, she called us her, she was our critical friend, so she would give us some feedback and say, let's look in these components, and we'd have a collective conversation at the next council meeting. So goodness gracious, this will be the end of me. Here's a snapshot of just the reading informational standards. This is kindergarten through 8th on your screen, and it's just 1 through 6. There's actually 10. So this is just a snapshot of, in the bold and grayed out boxes are our priority standards. In the white boxes, you could see at the end of the statement that it says supports. So it's saying that a certain standard would support another standard. When we were looking at these standards in all the reading and the writing and the language, we were looking into what was readiness for the next level. There's standard 2 in 2nd grade, and it all of a sudden starts to talk about paragraphs. In kindergarten first, you don't have that. So kindergarten, 2nd grade teachers were saying, for readiness of 2nd grade, we need to have this as a priority going forward. We also looked at some endurance, and you could see standard 1 is a priority across the grade levels. And it's really at the earliest grades talking about asking and answering questions, and going up to the intermediate citing evidence. And we said that we need to keep that strong throughout the grades. And also some leverage pieces here of that transfer piece. Standard 5 talks a lot about structure of text, and that can transfer into their science and social studies time in the elementary, and or their science and social science class in the junior high. A third purpose of the group was to come up with belief statements, and here you could see some pictures of them in action here, and that's Laura Belchenko reading from a anchor chart that was right over there. And when we talk about the belief statements for literacy instruction, we're talking about these clear expectations for all of our students across every grade and every school. You know, what's necessary for students to become confident in their literate lives. And as with priority standards, the belief statements pair together with the priority standards as we take our next steps, as I'll speak in a moment, about looking at curricular resources that would support our priority standards and belief statements. The process was pretty similar to the priority standards, but we started from scratch here, where every council member wrote down their belief of literacy in District 59, got together with the group, and they started wordsmithing. Sticky notes were all over this boardroom, and we were writing it on sharp paper. And you could see we had some little sticky circle stickers where we would start to evaluate and vote on some that really were speaking to us. And so at the end, we have come up with 10 literacy belief statements for our district. And there's many council members behind us tonight that I'd like to invite up right now to help read some of our literacy belief statements. We have Sarah Magnificki, a first grade teacher at Byrd. We have Lizette Fausto, an assistant principal at Claremont. Ann Fleming, our science and social science facilitator. Annie Gifford, instructional coach at Frost. And Larry Gannon, principal at Byrd. And Susan Savage, come on up. You all know who she is.
Okay. We believe literacy is a civil right. We believe all students can learn to read, write, listen, speak, view, and think critically when curricular resources are aligned to standards and instructional practices are research-based.
We believe literacy instruction provides an intentional balance between explicit teacher-led instruction and student-driven exploration and choice. We believe systematic and explicit instruction in foundational skills is the cornerstone of literacy development.
We believe all literacy learning is transferable, occurs within a language-rich environment, and leads to enduring understandings. We believe literacy instruction is most effective when it is culturally and linguistically responsive and engages students in learning.
We believe students must have opportunities to see and hear reflections of themselves and others through literature. And we believe in assessments that are authentic, ongoing, and consistent throughout the district, and that the results should be used to inform instruction, monitor student growth, and evaluate curricular resources.
We believe ongoing professional learning and development of educators is critical to achieving student success.
And we believe that students' literacy lives are enriched by partnerships between their families and the school community.
Who's got chills? I've got chills. Do you have chills? Those are good.
Thank you. Now for their song and dance.
Okay, in tandem with the work that we did with the Curriculum Council, it was a large council, 42 members on the group, but we wanted to hear from all of our stakeholders. So we created and administered some surveys, starting with our teacher survey. We distributed it to all K-8 teachers of literacy. So that's any teacher who teaches literacy throughout our district. And we got 70% response rate, which was amazing, fantastic, very high. So 165 of our teachers spent time really thinking about what their needs were and what was in front of them in terms of the district approved curricular resources, and they gave us their thoughts and opinions. And we used those to also help guide our decision making. So I'll just take you through a couple of the pieces of information of the feedback that we got. So first we asked teachers if they felt there was alignment between the learning targets, the reading learning targets, which are directly aligned to the standards that we are required to teach, and our current district reading resources. And you can see here 65.5% of our teachers said that they had inadequate alignment, and 12% said no alignment. So we knew immediately from this feedback that we needed to do something about that, right? Next, we have the writing learning targets. Same question about our writing learning targets and our writing resources. A similar response here, where 67.9% of our teachers said inadequate alignment, and 10% of our teachers said they didn't see any alignment.
So may I ask a quick question
Yeah,
on
go ahead.
this piece? Because I really stopped when I looked in advance at your presentation and saw this and found it pretty jarring. And I guess what I want to know is, did your committee see eye to eye with this survey data?
Yes, absolutely. The committee, the committee absolutely agreed wholeheartedly with this.
Thanks.
And we also asked a question about assessment. We asked several questions, but these were just a few we wanted to pull out because they're so related to our goal 1 of the strategic plan. And here we asked, do teachers have the assessment tools that they need to determine if students are growing or not in relation to learning targets, which again are in relation to our standards. And here we have a little over half of our teachers saying that it's inadequate, 25% saying it does not provide those that information that they need on a day-to-day basis. We also developed a survey, similar survey with our administrators and coaches because they're not teaching from the resources. It was a little bit different. Unfortunately, the response rate was a little lower than our teachers, so way to go teachers. Thank you very much for your engagement there. So we're not going to share the data because it was a little bit of a lower percentage, but we pulled out a few quotes from our administrators and quotes that we felt were very representative of the group. The data that we did have in asking similar questions was similar to the teacher results. So here we have units and lessons that are clearly aligned to all the priority literacy targets are a need for our teachers. Built-in formative and summative assessments that align to standardized assessment was another need. We need a resource that includes a variety of text types, lengths, readabilities, materials, and lesson plans for reteaching students in small groups. We need a resource that has embedded strategies for increased student engagement and a link to content instruction, reading and writing around real ideas from the world that build students' vocabulary and background knowledge, so related to science and social science concepts. So just some ideas that we pulled out from this survey.
So all this put together, here's the next steps. We are taking our junior high teachers are in a pilot. We're just starting that process right now, and they'll begin implementing the pilot after spring break. We've reviewed a few junior high curricular resources and narrowed it down to one that we will pilot, and there'll be a public viewing starting on April 7th that coincides with the Curricular Resource Committee. All junior high teachers were invited to participate in this process, and we have about 25 teachers participating. There's a couple of co-taught sections, so the core teachers teaching with the LBS, and then we have a few dual language classrooms as well, and then that's every grade that they're participating in that. And so that they will pilot the new resource during the 4th quarter, and then we'll make next steps after that pilot. We'll meet a few times and finalize it after that. With K2, so our kindergarten through 2nd grade, for next school year, we are looking in an exploration of materials is in progress right now. I'm not calling it a full pilot. It's a small group of the K2 teachers from the Curriculum Council that are looking into 2 potential resources for core instruction to help out those foundational skills instruction. And you heard a belief statement about that we need to teach our kids how to explicitly read. So we're looking at 2, and we're saying it's just for next school year because if we skip down to the next bullet, our whole K-5 will be looking into and taking that next step into the curricular review. So our hope is that as we go through that curricular review process, kindergarten through 5th, we find a language arts program that has all the components that we need, the reading, the writing, the foundational skills, the spelling link to it, handwriting, everything all encompassing based upon what we see in our priority standards and our belief statements. So that'll start at the beginning of next school year, and that goes hand in hand, right alongside everything that you've heard soon to be Dr. Joshua Perdomo about with the dual language leadership team. They're working on that as well, and the leadership team is coming up with their belief statements. We have core values as of now, and we'll take some next steps. So those 2, that K-5 English language arts, will go right alongside the Spanish dual language next year for that curricular review process. So that's where we're at when we think about our timeline, what we had to do as a council to develop those priority standards and our belief statements. That'll wholeheartedly lead our process that we're moving into next.
So before you move on, is there a common resource that's K through 8 that you're looking at? Or how do we ensure scope and sequence syncs up between the different levels?
Do you want to go ahead?
Anything that we're looking at, it's our standards that are driving our instruction. So if it's linked to the standards and it's supported by that, we'll see consistency across, all the grades. I know it was a conversation in math to have something K-8, and that is not as much as a driver with literacy. Are there materials out there? For sure. And then there's definitely ones that are just made for the junior high setting and K-5. So we didn't want that to lead the process, because we could really, as you see, we're taking the next steps with our junior high. It's a smaller cohorts. These teachers aren't teaching from the new math resource. So we were able to get into that a little bit quicker. Can you add on to that at all? Or?
I will just say that the resource that they chose to pilot does have a K-8, it does have K-8 alignment. So right now, that is still a possibility that we would have a consistent.
And can I ask one quick question? So Lucy Calkins is gone.
Well, once we adopt a new resource, when we bring to you this lovely resource that is working for our kids and that our teachers love, because it's coming soon, then we would not be teaching from Lucy Calkins any longer.
Okay, so pretty much next year we'll have something new.
For 6-8, we are further along in that process. For next year, K-5, we're continuing on with we've developed our learning targets based on the standards, and then our teachers use Lucy Calkins as their primary resource to pull lessons from that are aligned to those standards.
Since we're asked a question, I'm gonna go back to the 6 through 8 pilot progress. So that's gonna start April 7th, or right after spring break for the staff and the students with, some 20 teachers. So will that continue on through the year, and then we'll make a decision that summer, and then basically bring everyone up to this new language arts in fall of next year?
Yeah, if that's the route. So we have training tomorrow on the resource with the teachers, and then we will do some check-ins based upon finding evidence in the resource that supports our belief statements that they have chosen to kind of be drivers through this all. So it's about half of them, 6 of them to be exact. And then we'll have a final evaluation that looks at all of that, has some student feedback. We'll be doing some assessing along the way as well to see if there's some student growth on just just one quarter, so maybe 1 or 2 learning targets along the way. And from that, they'll have their final recommendation if we will, 1, bring it to you for adoption, or 2, pilot another resource in the fall.
So we're not gonna try and do it, like with the math, we looked at a couple different ones and kind of co-piloted them and tested them and came up with one. So we're gonna go with this one, and hopefully this one works.
So we, Alyssa and I evaluated 11 resources, paired them down, and brought 3 options to this team, to all junior high language arts teachers. They viewed presentations and got to ask questions from all 3 publishers, and then they gave their feedback on what they felt were the most aligned to our priority standards and our beliefs. And the one resource that we are piloting was heads and shoulders above the other 2 resources, and they felt very comfortable going forward with just this one.
So yeah, Randy, to your point, because I asked the team this same question. So the idea is, if this is successful, we would bring the recommendation forward for a full implementation for next year for 6 through 8. But they are very well aware and have reassured me that if this is not the chosen resource, that we will be then piloting something different in the fall and pushing that timeline back. So they were very committed and said, yes, we understand that. We're going to go forward with it with just the one.
I have a quick question. With the survey that we showed, the teacher survey, 20% said it was in full alignment, 20% said it was not aligned, and 60% or so was right in the middle. Were you able to analyze the data in the surveys to see what caused this group to say there was full alignment, what caused this group to say there wasn't? Or were you able to get information as to different resources, different the disconnect.
No, we did have them all, we made it very clear that we were talking about the units of study resources, so they should have been looking at that, the learning targets and what they're choosing to teach from. And we did disaggregate by grade bands, and we did not see any patterns or trends, like for instance, K2 saying it's more aligned than 6-8.
Sure.
There didn't seem to be any patterns and trends in that.
Okay.
If Dr. Bresnahan's thoughts come true and this is not accepted as the wonderful thing that we hope it is, do you have anybody working on looking at other programs and so forth so that will be something available if we need it?
Yes, we have, so we have the other two options that our teachers have already seen as a presentation, so perhaps they would want to go back to one of those. And then we also have 8 other resources that we evaluated more thoroughly, just because teachers don't have time to go into, and spend hours looking at these resources. But there are plenty of other options for us to present at that time.
And who knows, maybe one of the other options while you're investigating 8 or 10 others might end up being the one you want.
That's right. That's right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
But just to be clear, a majority of the teachers did like the one that you're going to be piloting.
Yes, it was the highest rating. Basically, every teacher who responded to our survey giving feedback rated this as very high alignment to our priorities and our beliefs.
Good, thank you.
Yeah.
Because for the literacy folks, we don't want to leave without leaving with a quote, and this comes from Kofi Annan, who was our UN Secretary General and spoken on 1997 at International Literacy Day. Literacy is a bridge from misery to hope, is a tool for daily life in modern society. For everyone, everywhere, literacy is, along with education in general, a basic human right. Literacy is, finally, the road to human progress and the means through which every man, woman, and child can realize his or her full potential. Thank you.
Thank you.
I do want to ask a couple, I want to go back to, sorry. I know you had to close, but, and there was questions, but I didn't know we were going to end this way. So the belief statements that we've created, now those are being shared out to everybody, and everyone's, because I'm just like, we have our strategic plan, we have, certain things. This is kind of going to be kind of put within one of our strategic plan goals then, or?
I think this lives beyond the strategic plan. Strategic plan's designed really to be that 5-year. I think belief statements hopefully will live a lot longer than that and become really embedded, something we'd put up on a wall, for example. But it's definitely, I think the work around developing those was so essential because literacy is so large and fluid and nuanced as compared to something a little bit more discrete and concrete like math. And so going through this process of the prioritization of the standards, of developing those belief statements, it really can change the trajectory of what we're looking at in terms of curriculum and how we teach. And that piece, I know it seemed like it was going slow, but it is laying a foundation for us to go so fast in terms of literacy development. And I really appreciate this committee and the council and the time that they spent to really go deep with that, because it's such a deep core value rooted thing, and it touches every single aspect of what we do in education. So
Yeah, and you should see the group in here if you came in on one of the days of their meeting. There are all these little tables, and you say something, they look up and they go, okay, hi, and then they're back. They're kind of like back to their little work.
It's important work.
Their important work is like, they knew how important it was. It was nice to see the interaction. I also saw, because I got to observe a little bit, that some of the teachers were jumping between grades to confirm what was going on, which kind of, what you mentioned, like the second and third graders were making sure what they were saying or what they were doing at this one was going to reflect on what they want to do. So I'm hoping to see that this K through 8 will, the streamless, become a seamless process would be the best word to say it.
Also, I hope as you move on that you won't have 25 at the bottom and 25 at the top as far as
Yes.
acceptance, and then this big 50% in the middle, hopefully it will shift.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then before you leave, can I just ask a couple questions?
Sure.
So can you define for me what foundational skills are?
Yes, go ahead.
Why, sure. There's standards, the reading foundational skill standards. We had some of our, oh yeah, Sarah's over there. We had some of our first and second grade teachers look at that, and they they said every single one of them is priority. So some of them, the Prince of Concepts, phonemic awareness, live just in K and first and second, but then some of the phonics work, the decoding of words lives K through 5. So we have that as priority standards, and those are really the standards that enable the students to lift the prints off the paper. Our literature, our informational standards, have them do something with it, then make inferences, summarize, talk about the characters. But those foundational skills, they're foundational for a reason, because they can't get to that work without lifting that print off. Can they have oral comprehension and all that? For sure, if someone was to read the text out loud, but foundational skills are those skills that are most foundational.
And then I know parents would want to ask, where does spelling and vocabulary fit into this process, into the skill set?
So spelling will go hand in hand with the phonics development. It's really thinking about the decoding of a text, but then the encoding, which is producing the words onto your pieces of paper in front of you. So we have to really think about, as students learn specific phonics skills in whatever language they're learning it in, it pairs exactly with the encoding, and we're not just reading the text, but we're also writing it. I can go into a lot of brain research if you want me to about it, about how we orthographically map words and put them into our long-term memory to be able to write them. So we'll really be looking at curricular resources that support that research. And we're not just memorizing words, because then we're doing work on the wrong
And that was
side of the
covered
brain.
in this belief statements of a balance,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I like that.
And I think what you would see in a research-based and aligned curricular resource is not the spelling lists of, when we were in school and we memorized 20 words and, spit them out on Fridays, but really word work and really understanding root words and their affixes and the Latin, and Greek pieces to that can help then transfer to, bigger words later on and that kind of thing. So it won't look like spelling in the past, but there will be that understanding of we're not just memorizing some words, but we're learning how to encode from our brain to the paper.
And then,
And-
sorry.
I was going to link it back to the vocabulary piece then too. So along with that, we can be building vocabulary. So, in our earliest grades, they're all language learners. So we want to make sure that along with the phonics, information of the word, what letters are being made up of, and how we write those words, that we're also attaching meaning to it. And a lot of the words that the kids write, especially in kindergarten first, are those like function words, with and of and en in Spanish and whatnot. And you're like, oh, you can't just act that word out or be a vocabulary word. So really having that language-rich environment, which you heard in the belief statement, to make sure that we're using that high level of language. And then anytime we are talking about words, that we're attaching that meaning to it. We have a sentence that goes with it when we can, and it's what we would think about a vocabulary word. We are acting it out. We have a picture to go with it as well.
And then the last question was the teacher assessment tools. What do teachers feel is missing in terms of being able to guide their students, that they're missing some sort of assessment tool? Because that was sort of the worst of the.
Yeah. So right now we have a great diagnostic that we give, 3 times a year, that gives us great information about our students, but we don't have, related to the resource that teachers are teaching day to day, we don't have those formative and summative assessments, other than our writing rubrics, which we do have with our units of study. But in terms of reading, a teacher couldn't say, okay, I'm really focusing in on standard 2 this week. How is my student doing in terms of growth on that? We don't have those kinds of assessments. The resources that we're looking into do have standards-based assessments that we can see pre-post and really guide the learning and inform our daily instruction based on that.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Item 6.04, winter benchmark report follow-up. This is one thing I had asked for after last meeting. We saw some great numbers, but I think a lot of us didn't really comprehend how well they were. And I think we want to have another chance to look at them and Tom to share this information while we're fresh.
Sounds great. I'm happy to be here, and we'll be expecting applause at the end of my. Yeah, so we received some questions, so I'm going to highlight a few of the slides and then try to respond to the questions we've received through those different slides. So I'm not going to go through everything, but clearly if there's something you want me to go back to or review, I'm happy to do it. And many of the things we'll talk about tonight have been highlighted in our both of the previous presentations, or we can hopefully show some alignment. So as we know, we have a goal to have 80% or more of our students across all demographic groups to be supported in Tier 1. And that Tier 1, that, as Tricia said earlier, the critical mass at that 25th percentile or above. So as we use this assessment, which we only do 3 times a year to speak to Dr. Robinson's point, it gives us a good idea of where the system is at and how kids are doing over time, but that day-to-day piece really doesn't come through this process. So one piece that we highlighted last time and really want to highlight tonight is where we look as a district compared to Illinois and the nation in this assessment. So when you look at the winter piece, you can see where we fell as a district. This is, we'd assessed back in December, early January, Illinois and the nation. And really in the math side and reading also, we're very, very aligned. You can see it was a little different in the fall, but the alignment is there. But also at the same time, when you go back pre-COVID to 2018-19, you can see in iReady's system, those results were different. They have about 3.5 million kids who assess in this, so it's a nice balanced piece to look at and get a good comparison across the board. So, we were thrilled, to be honest, to see that balance. I think the term I used many times, it's great to be average. We like to be right there. Obviously, we want to grow and improve, but to see where our system's at is a positive.
And most importantly, those change numbers that you put in parentheses underneath
Yes.
are showing we had better growth.
We're
than
closing that gap. I think ultimately that's how we got to that nice balance, because we closed that gap or improved a little more than Illinois and the nation. One of the questions that came up was related to this data, and you can see over on the side where we identified the 50% progress towards typical growth. So what iReady does, they give you end of the year targets. So when it says met, our kindergartners, 29% of our kindergartners met their end of year typical growth target. So what we do and what we did was we extracted the data and wanted to get an idea how many kids are at least 50% of their progress towards that typical growth goal. So for kindergarten, it was 66.7%. What iReady has been telling us these last few years, that if 40 to 60% of your kids hit their typical target, that's kind of the standard. If 70% hit it, that's excellent. So that gives us an idea where we're at. And actually, some of the earlier comments, you can see when we, even here, like that 3rd through 5th grade, you can see those numbers are a little bit on the lower side. That was something we identified last year and why that win time was implemented for math. At the same time, you have stretch growth goals. That's to close that gap. So 17% of kindergartners have hit their end of year stretch growth goal. 56% are on target for that. What iReady has told us is that 20% is, they call it good. They don't like to use excellent, but if 20% of your kids hit their stretch target, that's good in their system and their analysis of the system. Okay. This really relates to that tier level report, the branching minds piece we heard from Dr. Ossel and Ms. Senni. And you can see where this is where we were, oh boy, oops, sorry about that. This is where we were at in the fall. So as a system, 60.3% of our kids, remember we want to get to 80. So between fall and winter though, we grew by 4.1 percentage points to get to 64.4. Yes, that seems to be very solid growth. The system moved. And that's what we want to see. You can see how that then flows across grade levels and highlights a few of those grade levels that are on the lower side where we're doing some of our additional work. This slide, this slide. So a question came up about our bridging students. You can see from fall to winter, our tier 1, it actually dropped by almost 5%. So the unique thing about bridging students in iReady, those are students who are in their first year have exited EL. That's only about 70 kids in the system. So we did some research. It's about 2 or 3 kids went from tier 1 to tier 2. That's why you see that larger percentage. So it has an impact on the data in a different kind of way. But it was a great question and a way to really highlight. I think next time we do this, we'll try to give some numbers also, so you have an idea of that piece. It's where you might we have 5,000 kids taking this assessment. That's only 69. Another question that came up related to, sorry, slide 14. I went past it. That was slide 14. Boy, I'm doing well. No applause. Sorry about that. This slide really shows that earlier comment about the bell curve. Ultimately, we'll want this to kind of look like that, like where this will be lower, this will be higher, this will be lower. Right now you can see that heaviness in that bottom 20%. So that we need that to shift. That's the efforts. That'll get us to that 80%.
So this should be flat, because this is compared to a bell curve.
Thank you very much. So now I'm embarrassed and
sorry, it took me a long time to figure out this chart.
No, that's a great point. So the reality is we want this to flow across the system and only have 20% of the kids over here and 80% on this side. The positive piece to this, when you look from fall to winter, those numbers did shift. We moved a good number of kids out of tier 3 into tier 2 and tier 2 into tier 3, or tier 1, I should say. So the system appears to be working. The structures in place are having the impact at a rate that we think is really solid and positive in both reading and math.
And can I just point out one more thing?
Please.
So if you get 4% of students that move to that next bin you've got there, then if that bin changes, that means another 4% plus whatever change has to go further right? So it's not that one group of students is shifting, it's that one group of students is shifting and then a bigger group is shifting over in the next bin, right?
So we hope to continue on that process, but it's, and I think I said this last time too, the reinforcement the system gets, our staff gets, our kids get from this process is probably the biggest positive, just to see that effort really having an impact. Another slide, just jumping into, this is reading. So similarly, we see when we look at winter, how the district compares pretty favorably to Illinois and the nation. A little behind, but that growth side, those pluses were higher. So again, we're moving more kids into that early on and mid or on grade level pieces. And again, you can see then how that compares back to 2018-19 when 47% of the kids were in the green. Now nationally it's 41. So we're catching up, but the whole system's behind. I think we know and understand that piece.
What bothers me, Tom, about this is in the first column, consolidated consumer, District 59, 3 bottom levels, 1 grade below, 2 grades below, or 3 grades below. It's 77% of our students.
Yes, I understand that. So one thing about iReady, this assessment assesses kids for end of year skills. So whether it's fall or winter, we're always, where are they at compared to end of year skills? I totally agree. We don't want 22% of our kids at 3 grades below. That's why we see that nice, we moved from 22 to 16. Obviously, we want 100% of our kids to be in the green, but it's about the system moving. And again, this is assessing kids for end of the year skills.
And from fall to winter, it did improve somewhat, went to 6, but there's still 61% who are not making the grade. So
Exactly, that's why you heard
Yeah.
us talk about our MTSS system
it
tonight.
scares me. That's an awful lot.
It is an awful lot, and that's
Yeah.
why we're working on the whole system, looking at curriculum, building on the assessments we have in place.
Now, this is I-ready. What about the illustrative math?
So illustrative math is really the math curriculum. There are assessments connected to that, but we're not presenting our, including those in this piece, because this is our diagnostic benchmark. So 3 times a year we do this, where that's assessment that's tied to instruction on a day-to-day basis.
But if the scores are still difficult to accept on the I-ready, shouldn't we at least look at the illustrative and see if that is where we should be going?
I think our teachers, our building leaders, our synergy team are looking at that data every day. That data is guiding the instruction that's being delivered. This is saying, how's the system doing? Versus how's that just curriculum or that day in that classroom doing?
I guess I would speak to that with my parent hat on for a moment, because I have 2 students who are going through the illustrative math curriculum. So that's what they're learning daily in class, and then they'll have a test at the end of unit to see what their skills are on that particular unit. And as Tom mentioned, it's not reflected in what we see here, because these are the snapshots in time of a diagnostic on the broader scope of math skills over a year. So I imagine there'd be some work to align those to present that data, but I guess that to say this doesn't capture the totality of the math learning, right? There's the daily curriculum, and these are 3 snapshots in time of the large picture of what they learn over the year. And are they progressing toward that end goal?
And clearly that curriculum, that education, teaching, instruction will impact these results. I think what you heard from the teachers in the survey, and Dr. Robinson spoke to, is teachers are desiring more assessments that are related to what they're doing day to day, that formative piece. But this ultimately impacts, this is about what kids are learning in their classrooms. So we're seeing very nice growth from fall to winter. Do we want kids 16% 3 years or more below grade level? Absolutely not. Absolutely not, and that's what we're working on.
So can I ask again, for the branching minds for Spanish, we have other ways of entering information for reading. Is I-ready Spanish, English?
So I-ready, I think that Tricia's response to I-ready, so on the math side, the option is there for kids to take K to 8, the assessment in Spanish. That assessment, the Spanish assessment for reading, is a developmental tool, so it's not data that is adaptive yet or normed yet.
So this was only given in English?
For reading, this is only given in English, absolutely correct.
I understand what you said, Courtney, but the point is, if illustrative math is something that we're doing better at, then why are we wasting time doing the I-ready? We've been at it for 3 years, I think. It's not like we don't know already what we can get from I-ready.
Right. I think and I'll let Tom speak to it, but I think it's just a tool, like a measuring tool, because the complexity of bringing in the data on every student's unit math test is a lot more detailed, so to speak, than doing a high-level snapshot in time. So this is a tool to allow us to have, I think, more accessible data. And I think you're absolutely right. Like, I imagine MTSS teams and some that are digging deeper would maybe go look at that unit by unit data.
Yeah, so this gives us that snapshot in time 3 times a year. Also connected to I-ready, it helps define that personalized instruction piece where kids can do practice on their own outside of school or as part of the class day. But this would align with any big picture summative type assessment to give us an idea how our system is doing. Do those other curriculums and all those pieces inform that? Absolutely, they do. But this is something, before we had FAST, we had AIMSweb, before we had, or I should say, MAP, thank you very much, and even some other assessments way back in time. We used to do ITBS once a year to get a snapshot of the system, how they compare to other kids taking this same type of assessment. So 3 million kids take this assessment.
All right, just one more question. Do the majority of our teachers like I-ready, and do they want to continue with I-ready regardless of what?
I have not surveyed the teachers on I-ready.
Because if the scores are this bad, then I'd like to know what the teachers think about it.
Yeah, so the purpose of this assessment isn't to see, you know, it's not like a test when I taught in class. I taught this, now I want my kids to get 100%. Oh, they did terribly on the test. Well, that's my problem as the teacher. This is a skill-based, standards-based assessment. So where do kids fall with the standards? So that's a part of our system we need to know. It helps guide some of our curriculum work, helps guide some of our planning, where this gives that nice big picture overview. I haven't surveyed teachers. I've been in many MTSS sessions and meetings where teachers are engaged with this data, I think, at a pretty high level.
I think the point that's really important is that this is an assessment tool. So illustrative math provides our curriculum resource, that's the day-to-day, and they have assessments built within that. And then this iReady benchmark allows us to have a nationally normed assessment of students' overall learning, and then they take from 3 through 8, then they take the state test. So we're able to actually triangulate our data and look across 3 different data points to better understand how they align and see students, how they're performing overall. But as iReady is not something that impacts teachers on a day, it's not something that they teach, it's just an assessment that they give.
This is strictly an assessment then. So we're not teaching iReady math anymore?
No,
We are
no.
not.
iReady is not a curriculum,
Okay.
right? I think that was
All
the
right, this
point
is
of
just an
clarification.
assessment
This
tool.
iReady is just the
Not
assessment.
the-
Yes.
Not the curriculum. Okay,
Correct.
that makes me
That's,
feel a lot
okay,
better.
thank you for, I knew we were gonna get to it, Mardell. I appreciate you sticking with us.
Thank you.
So just to highlight really quick, this is the, where we take that data from iReady and turn it into Branching Minds, that report for the tier piece. So you can see in the fall, we were at 63.8% of our kids were in tier 1, where here and now in the winter we're at 66.9. So again, the system had some nice movement in tier 1. Couple other slides, just real quick. These are branching minds.
The
Yes.
demographic.
Yes.
This is branching minds, not iReady.
Yes, so this is the iReady data feeds into Branching Minds, and then we're able to disaggregate by demographic group to see where kids fall on the tier 1 side. So what we learned from this, most of our groups made progress, a few did not, so that's something that highlights some more than others. Again, those numbers of kids can have an impact on that piece, but it gives us a way to really dig into that demographic piece. That we can also do on the iReady side, but this really fits into that 80% goal for all demographic groups.
Right. So just for the non-English assessment, it might be nice to have the demographic groups for iReady, not just Branching Minds. I'm just worried about not having an English assessment, that this is
I got you.
hiding something.
Just making a note. Thank you. So just to finish up with a couple last slides. There's that piece again. So the other piece, we use this data, and this is something I didn't get much of a chance to highlight, but our district MTSS team, these were our study points for fall to winter. So those things you can see at the top, how is our win structure working? How is the phonics intervention having an impact? And we really dug into the data both at the iReady and Branching Minds level to tease out what are we seeing. In most cases, pretty positive data. At other times, we have to dig deeper, but it provided us with that opportunity as we work with schools and staff to, are we on track or not? Do we need to, and fall to winter isn't enough time to say we're going to change complete direction, but it gives you a nice indication, are we on track? So that team, many are sitting behind us, really worked throughout the winter after we got the data to dig deeper into these pieces and help guide some of our work.
So Tom, you talked about, answering these questions from the fall to winter.
Yeah.
When we get the spring results, we're gonna look at the same questions, and will we start reevaluating at that point then?
Yes, we could. I mean, I think if we're seeing positive growth in those areas, we'll stay on track. If we see something change dramatically, we might ask those questions. I think from my perspective, what we're doing better, or maybe I'm thinking better this way, is not instant reactions to things. Oh, that data's, we're off on a bad path, we gotta change direction. That stay the course and really let, over time, some of that data play out. unless something stands out really dramatically, like we're not seeing any growth at all in any kids, let's say in an intervention or in the phonics piece or whatever we would want to, we'd be dealing with that, I think, before we got to spring benchmark, because we'd know what teachers would be telling us it. But I think we'll stay consistent unless we see some big changes and continue to analyze over time. One thing I wanted to point out to the group, so we've talked a lot about personalized instruction. So when you take the iReady assessment, it gives kids a path to do individual work and work on some of their skills. What we've learned on Friday, we learned from a few staff members that it appears some of our savvy technology students have found a hack into the system where they were able to give themselves 100% on a quiz without spending any time in that quiz. So I think, as Dr. Bresnahan said today, that's really bad, but boy, that's pretty impressive. It appears these things are out on the internet and easy to find for some kids. We're digging deeper into how many kids. Right now, it looks like it's 25, 30 kids. We don't know for sure. It has no impact on the assessment data we went over. It's really just related to the personalized instruction piece, and we're on a path where we can figure out who those kids are. So if you're listening in, kids, we'll be talking to you.
Before they spread it to the rest of the.
And iReady obviously is working on fixes behind that. I've even worked with Google. They've given us some direction. One thing we want to be careful of is we don't close our kids out from doing things that they need to do in their other work just so they can't mess with this one piece of data. The last piece, just the reflections. So again, we saw some nice growth and very aligned to Illinois and national data on iReady. We saw some very consistent growth towards that 80% Tier 1 goal. Many of our kids are on target for their typical and stretch goals, and our teachers are using the data, celebrating successes, and identifying opportunities for improvement. But we're still, even at 65%, we're still quite far behind that 80% goal. We see those achievement gaps with some of our demographic groups that we know we have to close. In some areas where we're very aligned to national norms, and others as we get into domains like, let's say, geometry or different math pieces or reading pieces where we're not as aligned as we'd like to be. And then we're just building on assessment literacy, using data to inform instruction. And I don't have a quote.
Well, there goes your applause.
I'm glad you mentioned geometry because that's the one I expect we'll see the most growth in, right?
So I don't know off the top of my head, but let's hope so.
Thank you, Tom. I'm actually. And what do you get? And how are you going to top these results for spring? Okay, we're on discussion items. The first discussion item is 7.01, the PTAB authorization to intervene on assessment appeals. Ron?
That's me. 1 second. I'm trying to find my sheet that I can read. Actually, it's right up there. Thank you. So this is something that we do every year in the district. The PTAB authorization to intervene on assessment appeals. The value in that is that we receive notice from the Cook County Board on different appeals, but we don't get a lot of time to actually get them to the board to get any sort of, action. So what this does is it allows us the ability to work and even partner with District 214 on these appeals so that when the time comes, we can actually just get things moving instead of having to come every time to the board.
Basically, these are commercial properties, correct?
Large
commercial properties.
Yeah, generally, big time.
And then wasn't there a law or something like that that kind of helped with this, to help us with this, or they're trying to pass a law?
Correct. So the state has passed something so that we are, they do talk to us about this now. Look, we actually do hear from the PTAB assessment and appeals. In the past, we didn't. So it was more of a, Aries Delianis had to really be on the ball and talk to us about what we're hearing. So that has been extremely helpful for us instead of just digging through different types of legal mumbo jumbo.
And then can you explain the importance of this authorization to, or why we get involved in these appeals?
Absolutely. So when these appeal processes occur, there are a lot of times when there are commercial or industrial that would like to reduce what they owe in taxes. Now, as a school district, we're still going to be receiving what we're entitled to. By doing this and actually fighting these appeals, it protects the homeowner, people who live here, the residents of Elk Grove and our other municipalities, so that instead of that tax burden falling on them, we can at least do whatever we can to mitigate that from what this happens on. So that's why we do it. That's what it's for.
Any other questions? Any other questions, comments? Item 7.02, 2022-2023 school year pay bus fee.
So every year we look at how much it costs to transport a student to and from, depending on if they are within the certain mileage for the state. What we do, we look at the calculations, and then we find what an estimated account would be for those costs. We're currently crunching those numbers, but I do know that we are on the very, very low end of what we could charge, and as of right now, only 4 students have chosen to pay for these services. So it's just one of those things that we do have in the event that a child were to ask, and we had the room on the route to make sure that we could actually get them proper transportation.
So can you kind of explain, I mean, because right now, any student that lives 1.5 miles away from a school qualifies for bus services, or if they have to pass a state area that's considered dangerous.
Correct.
And then those students that pay for this bus fee, they would actually have to go to an existing stop within the route, correct?
Right, and they'd have to, and they wouldn't qualify because they may not be on a hazardous area, or if they're under that 1.5 miles. But we've seen considerably less students. I believe it was 12 or 13 last year. We're down to 4.
What was the fee we charged last year?
It was I believe it was $350. But what we've learned is with the inflation piece, because we kept it frozen the last 2 years, and that's what we're working on as a team. It's over double if we're to do what the proper calculations would be in the district.
But I would ask this question: if we're not adding another stop to the route, and we can't add another student onto if we can add another student on the bus without, exceeding the maximum of the bus limitations, kind of what's the cost related to that?
A lot of it has to do with not just the inflation, but the amount of students that are on a bus really determines another route, or if we don't have another route. So it's us pretty much covering ourselves in terms of the financial piece, because if we were to allow anybody for $350, I'm sure you get a lot of people who would like to come get a free ride, not a free ride, but be on that route, where if it's higher, well, then you have a discussion, because otherwise you may not be able to provide for additional busing, and that's kind of where it comes to. The dollar amount kind of is that threshold. And even then, if there's nobody for the route where they can't figure it out, we may reject it anyways.
Okay, thank you.
Is there still only one person who wants to pay for it?
As of right now, there are 4.
4 right now.
It's gone down.
It's really touchy, because I remember when my kids were in school and we missed the free bus by 5 houses. 5 houses we missed it by. So I feel sorry for these people, because who knows how close they are to to being on the regular route.
Any other questions or comments?
I drove my kids to school.
Thank you.
All right, item 8.0, superintendent reports. 8.01, strategic plan department oral reports.
All right, so I'm going to kick us off tonight talking about some of our updates related to our strategic plan. So I'm going to particularly focus on our equity area, even though the topic that I'm going to talk about actually kind of bleeds out across multiple areas. But we mentioned earlier during the MTSS report that we were addressing some of our scheduling needs. And so early on, even right when I first started, we knew that our junior high schedules was an area that we wanted to definitely address. Through our equity audit, we actually found that we have multiple areas across that we could really address through some scheduling changes, as well as looking at some of our compliance issues. So for example, looking at our K through 5 physical education compliance, where students are supposed to receive at least 3 times per week physical education. So we're not currently in compliance for that. And then we also looked at it, maximizing the use of our early childhood center and making sure that we were not only using the facilities, but offering both AM and PM opportunities. And we had some limitations to that ability based on our scheduling. So we've really tackled from a pre-K through 8 perspective, looking at scheduling as a whole. And first and foremost, putting our students first and ensuring that we were able to look at what their individual needs are, what was our schedule able to address, what was it not. At the junior high level, we actually started a task force very early on last fall. And this was actually a process that began long before me, I believe back in 2019, to really look at the junior high schedule in particular. So this year, coming into the year, we had one school that had started already a form of a block schedule. That's Holmes Junior High. Our other 2 junior highs are actually on different schedules. So we wanted to provide consistency across all 3. That was one of our primary goals, as well as really looking at some of those needs, such as win time. So you heard about that earlier. So right now, our current structure, if students have to receive interventions, they are pulled from some other classes where that time is not dedicated or protected. So we wanted to see if we were able to do that, as well as increase our instructional minutes for some of our core content areas, such as math. So the task force really met and did that, and we have really gotten to a final stage of our scheduling process for our junior highs that we will be moving towards for next year. We've received a great deal of feedback from our teachers and from our staff in terms of pros and cons about this shift. So we fully recognize this will be a major shift for our teachers next year, probably more so at our 2 junior highs that have had a more traditional schedule, and probably a little bit less for those that were on a block schedule this year. But we recognize in looking at our student achievement and in looking at our MTSS and looking at the programs that we want to be able to offer for our students, especially in the area of dual language and our English learners, that we need to do something substantial and that is consistent across all 3. So I feel that we've done a very good job at running a process to engage our staff, to seek feedback, but also to recognize that we cannot make everybody happy. And we are going to do what we believe is best in students' interests, looking at research-based best practice. We're going to implement a change for next year, but also be collecting feedback and monitoring how that goes next year so that we can always continuously improve and modify. And again, as we strengthen our core, we will hopefully have less need for interventions, and then we may be looking at how we can modify that in the future as well. The elementary schedule, what the impact that you're going to see for both the junior high and the elementary is an increase in staff, because we can't make these modifications without the addition of some staff. So there will be a substantial ask from the board to fund some new positions for us. At the elementary, it's going to be those expanded physical education roles, as well as looking at expanding our fine arts, because that, as well as being, delivering better and a more well-rounded education for our elementary students, it is also the vehicle that we use to provide collaborative learning time for our teachers. So while students are in physical education or art or music or LRC, those grade level teachers are then able to have that protected collaboration time. So that will be the offset and the provided time that goes hand in hand with the elementary schedules. It is no small feat to coordinate 11 very diverse elementary schools. We have, as we talked about in our equity committee of the whole, We have some schools that have a large number of students at capacity and a larger number of sections per grade level. We have some schools that have a very small number of sections per grade level and everywhere in between. And to be able to section and to plan is very challenging, to say the least, and to do it in a way that provides equity. So I'm really incredibly pleased with our elementary principals and assistant principals who came together and probably built about 14 or 15 different schedules over the last 4 to 5 months to really land on something that we can guarantee for everyone in terms of equity of instructional minutes as well as those collaborative plan time minutes. So we will be, based on the board's action tonight, we will be potentially moving forward with the elementary schedules changes as well. And then the Early Learning Center is really to maximize our PM offerings and our AM offerings to maximize it to 5 days a week in the afternoon, which again would require a schedule shift for our teachers. So we recognize the significance of the shift that it's asking people to do, but we also believe that we've gone through a rigorous process and that we are doing it for the right reasons to meet our curricular needs and our educational needs for our students. Questions on that?
Do we want to see the scheduling? Can you like put in a Friday update, kind of talk about?
We can definitely, as we can share what it will accomplish at each of the schools and the rough outline for all grade levels. I will share that with you.
Yeah, because it kind of goes, here's what it was and what it is.
Yes, we can see what we have currently, and then what we're able to gain as a result of the new schedules, and can summarize that.
Moving students from the really overcrowded schools to some of the less crowded schools?
Mardell, that is a great question. That is not part of the scheduling changes, but that is absolutely part of the equity work that we need to do. We are engaging Crapper right now to do some further studies for us to project out enrollments and then to look at potential boundaries so that we can really look at how we better balance our schools. Because until we solve that issue, we are going to struggle in terms of equity. And that will be the task of the administrative team and the board to start looking more deeply at those particular solutions as they apply across our schools.
So with regards to the new FTEs that are needed for the elementary schools, is that going to be something that we can factor into the budget? I'm wondering if that requires like an expansion or addition to the budget, or how we plan to pay for those.
So yes, we would build that within the budget moving forward. I believe that it is within our budget and our means to live with. I think we also need to look long term. Right now, we are in a position where, based on our current structures, we are kind of forced to add resources as opposed to being able to look at maximizing resources. So until we make some other shifts across our schools from a equity lens and a balanced lens, we may be heading down this path that I do not want to head down, where we're just constantly adding. What we need to shift gears is look kind of at those root foundational pieces so that we can begin to look at how we maximize resources across programs, across grade levels, across schools, as opposed to having class sizes that range from 9 to 32. That prohibits us from making some more financially responsible decisions, and that's something that the board is going to have to engage in long term. So I feel confident moving forward for next year. Next year I really see as a growing year, a step forward, but it's one step in a much bigger system that we have to come up with a solution for.
But then would that be would those positions be more of a temporary kind of thing, depending on what we shift to in the future?
I don't believe so. I think these are positions that will definitely contribute to us moving in a step in the right direction, and we'll be able to utilize them moving forward, because expanding right now we have shared positions for fine arts, art, and music. And so students at the elementary level get art one week and music the next week, which is this is probably the first place I've ever experienced that in my career. So I will say that a step forward in expanding our fine arts opportunities and PE, those will be utilized throughout our system regardless of how we move forward, is my anticipation.
And I think you also rarely see teachers who are sort of trained directly in both, right? Usually you have a teacher who's one or the other, so they're trying to, as best they can, resource themselves for what's not their primary area of expertise.
Yes, I would say that's absolutely true. We look at our teachers that are teaching both, they are certified or licensed in one, but not both.
So for the elementary schools, adding the PE and fine arts will add planning time for classroom teachers, correct?
Absolutely.
How about at the junior high level? What happens?
Junior high, it will, number one, ensure that we have highly qualified teachers teaching the content area for which they are licensed, which is a must.
Right.
It also allows, the new schedule also does expand opportunities for collaboration for teachers.
Good.
And that is all I had, so I will pass it on to my colleagues for their reports.
I am going to jump in as my report is a good follow-up to that conversation. So we have been very focused this year on implementing WIN at our elementary buildings based on the data that we had and the student needs that were presented for large groups. Now we have really shifted our focus into WIN for junior high for next year. So part of that schedule change will be that there is a flexible time of the day where we can better meet student needs, and we're not required to pull them out of other classes, losing opportunities in order to provide intervention or enrichment. So we have been focused at the district level on really looking at the data, looking at how many students we have projected for next year who may need intervention, what types of intervention, and what are common domains that we would need to instruct in that intervention process. So we are now working to map out some resources and plans for our teaching staff in terms of literacy intervention, math intervention, enrichment opportunities that will focus on STEM, coding, social emotional learning. And we're also looking at AVID, which is a program, AVID stands for Advancement via Individual Determination, that seeks to lift students by providing lots of different study skills, executive functioning skills, leadership opportunities. And so we are rounding out the options that we will start with for a junior high WIN. And we will be going out to schools to seek feedback from staff and make sure that we involve them in that process this spring, so that we are not bringing these things to them in August, that we're really thinking about it, talking about it, and providing those as early as possible so we can start those conversations and continue them in collaboration with our junior high staff. So that has been our focus, and I think Susan's going to expand on that even further.
Yes. So my updates have to do with our strengthening the core. Most of my updates are surrounding that. I will touch on AVID in a little bit as well. So just for the board's awareness, we are going to have a math update next month at our board meeting. We've had a very robust implementation plan, and we are going to have some information shared with the board so you can see how students are responding, how staff are responding to math at all levels of our district. In terms of literacy, you've heard a lot tonight, and we're going to continue to really monitor that pilot process. And if all goes well, discuss with the board and bring action item for approval, should that be the case. But we're going to really keep a close eye to make sure that it is really what is best for us moving forward. In terms of dual language leadership team, it must be noted that the literacy work and the dual language team are working extremely closely together. So we are actually going to be having a Spanish language arts scope and sequence developed with members of the dual language leadership team. And we are going to be working through that action plan with the actual entire team. Tonight, tomorrow, and Wednesday night, Joshua Perdomo is actually having parent meetings at the junior highs to make sure that 5th grade parents moving up to the junior high understand what that program looks like and explain and be available for any parents who want further information about the junior high program. I will share his presentation in the board weekly on Friday, so you can take a look at that as well. That was one of the things that came out of the audit, was decreased communication as the years go on. So we really want to try to work on that right now. Now, in terms of AVID, AVID is, as Katie said, Advancement via Individual Determination. So AVID is an organization that is a not-for-profit that works and partners with school district. Through an equity lens, it focuses on identifying students who are in a certain target area of performance and skills, and really dives into developing those skill sets with them to accelerate their learning and provide more opportunity for advanced placement potentially. So we're looking at AVID and AVID Excel. AVID Excel actually is for our EL students, and it targets students who are long-term ELs. Those students who our data is showing us are just not passing the access test, and it's very targeted towards meeting those language proficiency skills. We are going to be able to use our win time for those students, so it won't impact their core, it won't impact elective options, but it does provide an amazing opportunity for that. Some of our building leaders and our district leaders have experience with AVID in other districts that they've worked in, so we really are excited about this. So at our upcoming meetings with the junior highs, we're gonna share more about AVID, gather staff feedback, input, who might be interested in, because AVID does require extensive training and site level leadership teams that work through that program, as well as a district leadership team. So there's lots of moving parts, but it is a very exciting opportunity that we're gonna explore. We'll come back, I'll share more with the board next month on where we are and be able to kind of go through any questions you might have about AVID as well. So that is one of our opportunities. I think for me, there's just one other quick thing. We talked a lot about PE at our electives at the elementaries. They are engaged in curriculum work right now. They are going through the priority standards process, so they're doing very similar to what the literacy team did. The teachers are doing an amazing job, and they're diving right in. So we're gonna keep you up to speed with that so that we have a solid core for whatever comes to fruition with those positions.
So can you just clarify for AVID, is it junior high? Is it
Yes.
all grades?
Junior, so AVID is for junior high.
Okay.
They actually do have AVID elementary, but we're looking right now
At the
junior high
level.
process. And some of our, Rolling Meadows has it, AVID at Rolling Meadows. Elk Grove currently does not, but we're gonna engage in conversations as to what they've been doing with that. So it is something that really puts students in an excellent position for coursework at high school.
All right, I think I'm going to jump in. I guess we're going a little tennis action here, back and forth. So I'll just share a few things. Connected to our equity work as a district, the state is actually moving an equity reporting tool forward next year called the Equity Journey Continuum. And it'll be part of the school report card. And it provides some data connected to how equity plays across three main areas: student learning, learning conditions, and elevating educators. And every school district in the state will get a score for each of those areas that'll be made public. And the tools they use, it's data they have access to that we already report out on, but they utilize a framework they spend a lot of time researching to give you a score. So the lower the score, the less equitable; the higher the score, the more equitable. But this will come out in the fall of 2022. The one part that is understandable yet a little frustrating, they're using, for the most part, 2018-19 data, because that's pre-COVID. So that's where student growth data was still on the school report card, and the assessment data wasn't impacted by everything. So it'll be older data for the most part, I think, outside of financial data. We did get a preview of that we have access to now, and I think I'll share in the Friday update some of that information and a few of the links if you want to dig deeper into the data. But I think it just reinforces, District 59 isn't on an equity journey. Illinois, the nation, is on an equity journey, and they're trying to develop tools where every district can try to get better. The first time in my career, the state superintendent led the webinar on this. I've never seen that before. That tells you how important it is to the state. The other piece, we are at the point in our data dashboard research where we're ready to make a choice or a recommendation. We'll follow up on Wednesday with our strategic plan committee to share a little additional data, but this has been some research we started 2 school years ago, then paused and kind of restarted when Dr. Bresnahan joined, and are at a point now where this is a key part of our strategic plan, so we can monitor, analyze, visualize data across all of our data systems. And ultimately, one of the big goals I think the board's talked about, have dashboards out there for our community to see and that we can update on a regular basis. School report card's great, it's once a year, where, you know, the board identifies clear targets, things you want to share with the community, where we can gather that data. And I think through much of our work, especially equity work this fall, there have been times we've had to pause to say, well, we got to go do the research and extract data and analyze the data. We're hoping that some of the tools that are out there, we can do that in the moment. And we're getting close to that piece. And just the final piece, state testing is starting. We heard that earlier. Science assessments started last week, will occur this week with makeups after spring break. And then the IAR, the Illinois Assessment of Readiness, will start in April. We'll have 3 weeks of testing, 3rd through 8th grade for IAR, 5th and 8th grade for science. And that's it for me.
Tom, can I ask you just a quick question about the equity piece at the state report card level? And I guess Tom or Terry, either of you, but do you feel like, I don't know how deep you've dug into those 3 categories that they're measuring, and then specifically what data that we already provide they're using to measure that. But I guess I'm just wondering, does that align with like our priorities in the equity audit? Does it deviate from our priorities in the equity audit? Do you think the work we are doing will be reflected in those scores?
You know, I would say the number one piece is about student learning, and it is state level data, but it's all about the achievement gap. So I think we are very aligned to, we recognize we have some significant achievement gaps that we have to address. And that's actually our lowest score on this draft right now, so it reinforces that piece. The learning conditions, those are things like suspensions and expulsions and student attendance. We're actually doing pretty well, and we've been working on that for a little while. And then the elevating educator pieces is really, again, that equity piece with what does our staff even look like? Do they meet and balance out with the way our kids are? So I think it's very aligned, yet in a much broader way.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a much more long-term reflection of our work, as opposed to like, you know, we're going to see results in 22. It's going to be, this is a 5-year investment, and we should see some critical growth in those areas if we continue doing the work that we're focused on. That's my hope, my hypothesis.
Thank you both.
All right, good evening. It's my turn. As Dr. Bresnahan shared, it's going to be a very busy spring in human resources, and we're excited about that. So we are currently engaging in conversations with our staff and the administrators to identify our true openings. What I mean by true opening is that if you have a 3rd grade teacher who is planning to retire after an amazing career, that doesn't always equate to a posting for a 3rd grade teacher. Sometimes there's a voluntary transfer request. Sometimes sections coming up from the next grade might be smaller, larger. Often there are a couple moves with most openings. So we want to be cautious to make sure that we really know what is the current opening. Have we been able to have conversations to honor our staff requests? Are we looking at changes in enrollment, programming, and then we know our true opening. Then we can make sure that we post the position and get a highly qualified candidate. So we are on pace to be able to get our postings up to be at the very start of the job pool, candidate pool. So we're hoping to have postings up between the beginning and middle of spring break, which I cannot believe is already here next week. You will also notice that spring is here, so we are starting to think about honoring and celebrating some of our staff. So we're pretty excited. We have Volunteer Week, Staff Appreciation Week, and we think we're going to be able to get back to typical and honor retirees and those with significant years of service. So stay tuned for that. I will be updating the board with dates.
Ross, how soon do teachers have to let you know if they want to transfer?
Is there a deadline on that? There is not a deadline. And that is because sometimes an opening may become aware to us even just this week. So we're always open to those conversations. Typically, the majority of staff have shared an interest around winter break. But if one still came in, or if they saw a posting next week that they didn't realize was going to be a posting, they could certainly reach out, apply, engage in conversations to make sure that we hear everyone that's interested.
All right, I will go next. Thanks, Ross. So in goal 3, we have two-way communication and collaboration, and that reads, utilize tools and strategies to effectively connect with all audiences, to share and receive information, and increase public awareness and perception of the district. And I want to talk about a couple things real briefly that we've been doing to increase that two-way communication, because we know we do send a lot of information, and I shared this last meeting. We send a lot of information out, but what are we doing to receive feedback? So one way, this Wednesday, Dr. Bresnahan and I are meeting with the FTO PTO Council to have a feedback session with that group, so we're looking forward to that. I'm also exploring a few options that we have with some of our current tools, like Seesaw is rolling out a new messaging app starting this summer that has a lot of additional two-way communication that it currently does not have, so allows for conversations to happen. There are also additional tools that are available that allow for that kind of conversation. It's the back and forth. It's when someone wants to ask a question and we can provide feedback in a small group, one-on-one. It all depends on the use of the app, but we also know we don't just want to be app-driven or digital resource-driven, so we're looking at additional ways to have in-person opportunities to receive that feedback and have those conversations. Another way that we're trying to increase that collaboration and even awareness, we're increasing or improving, I should say, our live streaming setup. So we live streamed and recorded the kindergarten information night a couple weeks ago. I shared the link with you all in the Friday weekly one before this last one. I did not share, but I will this week. Thursday night, we also live streamed and recorded the Family Information Night. That was Kenneth Young came out and presented to us on social media and digital safety. So I'll share that with you as well. We're just trying to allow people to have access to more of these events than they had previously. And not just access live streaming, but access as an archive, as a video archive. That does take some discussion with presenters, especially if we have external presenters, to make sure that they give us permission to be able to do that. But we're working very hard to make sure we secure that and then to be able to share that out with families afterwards. We are also working on then the translation of those. We have a way in YouTube to translate the closed captions, but we also have staff who are working on going back and translating the actual full event. That takes some time, we know. Like Thursday night was great because we had an English session, but we also had a Spanish session that was happening as well. So we're working to make all of those different languages available to our families. And then we're also increasing, you'll see a second camera in here tonight, we're working on increasing our accessibility even to meetings here. This is sort of an experiment. We're going to create a better, more, I'd say more permanent approach where we'll have some cameras soon mounted that will allow us to be able to see the presenters better, because we definitely want to hear Tom's next closing quote. Without it, I feel a little lost, I feel a little empty inside. So we're all of these ways to try to help connect more with families. And again, that two-way piece is really important so people can still hear things, but then provide us that feedback that we need after that. So, and our table finished first, so we win. Sorry.
I have a purple tie like the board president right now, so. Sorry, Mr. Reed. So, it's a challenge right now. I really, really, really love what we're doing. We have a lot of great things and a lot of happenings, but the best thing with operations and like finance is when you're not being seen, because that means you're doing it right. So, yeah, the budget is a big thing right now. I'm not going to lie on that one. But just like Dr. Bresnahan said, we have the resources. It's great to see the fact that a team all around us here are all supportive. It's been a wonderful process. It's difficult to get everybody on the same page, but it's here, and it's really, really cool. And that's kind of what I try and do. Our business office team is like the glue behind the scenes. Like, we're trying to get those resources out to everybody, have those meetings, talk about what they need, the staffing, the resources, in order to make it work. A lot of it's communication in that piece. The other thing is the operational piece that we're still working on behind the scenes, and the cameras and Bird's getting that taken care of right now as we speak. As Mr. Gannon's shaking his head yes. And then the other piece that I think that nobody really talks about or knows about just yet, though, Mr. Vittori and I had a really good meeting with some of our teammates before the meeting on insurance. There's a lot of work that we all do behind the scenes to make sure that everything is adequate for our staff because we really do value them. And we had some really great conversations on trying to make things work for us all. So I have to give him a ton of credit for that, and Mary Schlotman too and his team. They're incredible. So it's been a lot of behind the scenes for sure, and it's exciting though.
Thank you. I think we're going to move on to item 9.0 consent agenda.
And Randy, if I could just make a note, we had a late change in the consent agenda. So whomever makes the motion, we are going to exclude 9.08 for the approval of non-renewal and or dismissal of certificated staff. That is, there is no one on that portion. So we removed that and we had an additional resignation that was added. So just know that that was modified. So whomever makes the motion, exclude 9.08.
I can make the motion. This is Ms. Lang, and I move, be it resolved that on the 14th day of March 2022, the Community Consolidated School District 59 Board of Education approve the consent agenda as presented and amended, including 9.01, approval of minutes, 9.02, disbursements resolution, 9.03, financial reports, 9.04, acceptance of recommendations, human resources report, 9.05, approval to destroy 18-month-old or older closed session recordings, 9.06, approval of board policies recommended by IASB with district edits, and finally 9.07, approval to release library grant funds.
Do I have a second? Oh, okay. Questions, comments? Roll call, please.
Espino.
Aye.
Lang.
Aye.
Mencia.
Aye.
Cherry, aye. Reed.
Aye.
Sager.
Aye.
And Schumacher.
Aye.
And the motion passes.
Okay. Item 10.0, public hearing on school holiday modification for the 2023 school year.
Is this more than we usually have? Because it seemed like an awful lot of changes.
I'm going to let Ross, are you ready? I can't see you across the podium. I'm sorry. I'm
cannot
trying to make
see
eye
you.
contact.
I am here. I apologize. I can't remember the last time we did this, so my apologies. To answer your question, Mrs. Schumacher, there are two, you may recall from last month, there are two new holidays that will be recognized within the calendar next year. Those holidays are Election Day and Juneteenth, so we have accounted for those accordingly. We are also still working through the calendar committee, and so we have every goal to bring that to the board for action next month, and we will share some drafts with you prior to that. And so this will help guide that work since we need to do this before we have the calendar approved.
So basically, we're talking like, we moved Veterans Day, which is almost right around Election Day, we moved that to the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, so we could have the Wednesday off for Thanksgiving. And now we're talking about like President's Day and Columbus Day, moving those also to Thanksgiving week.
One of the suggestions on this list is for Columbus Day to be moved to Tuesday, November 22nd, in the event that one of the draft options would allow us to have the week of Thanksgiving off. But in order to honor Columbus Day on a different day, the board would have to act on that this evening. That doesn't necessarily mean that that is where Columbus Indigenous Peoples Day would land. But we would not be able to bring that option to the board next month if the committee feels that that is the best place for it.
This gives the maximum flexibility for the use of the holidays for the calendar committee.
So I guess just a quick question. So in terms of holidays, like it sounds like we're considering more significant changes to where the holidays are appearing versus what we've had in the past, just thinking that we've had, I think, typically 3 days a week for Thanksgiving. So is the driver behind this the negotiations that would change where these appear, or what am I missing? I'm sorry.
You are not missing anything. It is not connected to negotiations. Actually, some of our neighboring districts, they also have that full week off. We're seeing a shift to that. Without having the final calendar ready to share, we are seeing trends in school district calendars. We have the last few years in trying to find more breaks and time to spread out some of that time to recharge. Whether that is some institute days, whether that's with some of the breaks. Teachers, like many of us, they need more time. It's been a stressful couple years, but they don't have the luxury to use time the way we do. So we're looking at calendars in a modern sense to be able to balance things out a little bit. But again, it's in draft form, so we'll be getting more input than typical and then sharing those with the board.
So it sounds like a two-step process then. Tonight, we would just grant, do we need to take any affirmative
No,
action?
tonight is just the public hearing. All we
Got
need
it.
to do is open this up for public hearing, acknowledge it, and then the next process would happen as part of the calendar piece.
There is an action for the holiday piece later tonight as well. And as Dr. Bresnahan shared, it really will allow the most flexibility. The real impact would be next month when the board acts on the calendars.
I'd like to just comment that I don't mind moving a holiday to a different week in conjunction with some other holiday if it makes it easier for everybody. But to move everything seems to take away the meaning of the holiday. Columbus Day, for example, should not be celebrated with Thanksgiving because they have absolutely nothing to do with each other.
Marta, if I could just clarify on that. So what this would allow us to is to have school in session on those days, where actually we can wrap educational lessons around the actual meaning of the holidays. It's just that we're receiving the day off per the state on those other days. So it actually brings, in my opinion, more meaning to some holidays when we celebrate them or acknowledge them within the school day as opposed to having the day off. So that's the offset of it for some of them.
You can see in the resolution, although it gets lost in some of the text, the school code only allows this for 5 holidays, and it is for that exact intent so that students and activities could be in session, like Veterans Day, so that then students aren't home, they're there participating in activities. So I agree, we certainly don't want to move all of the holidays. We're just exploring different options to be able to have instruction with students, provide families and staff more breaks, and see if a more balanced approach is better for our modern system.
And we're trying to still sync up with the high schools.
We are absolutely trying to sync up with the high schools in terms of start date and the major breaks. And as much as possible with our neighboring districts too. The break that seems hardest to do that with is spring break. Sometimes those don't line up, but when I look at what has already been published by nearby districts, not everyone is done. It looks like we'll be in really good shape to align very well next year.
Having Lincoln's birthday with the other presidents as President's Day, that's fine because they were all presidents, but I don't want to start celebrating Christmas in December.
No, and that would not be allowed. So I think Veterans Day is a great example because we're in session on Veterans Day, and it's actually a great learning opportunity, and we have visitors like Randy here who comes in and reads to our students. Again, it's just we don't have to have a day off at all. What this balances out is our school days and our staff days. So it's maximizing time away from school for our students while honoring these days in school for learning.
Yeah, we don't move the holiday because
Right.
we don't have the authority to move the holiday. We're just moving when the days off are.
Correct.
Yes.
Well, I don't mind the days off, and I'm sure the staff appreciates the days off, but I'd like to have the holiday at least someplace near the holiday. Otherwise, to me, there's no meaning to it. It's just a day off, and if it's just a day off, that's fine, but that kind of takes away from what our country is all about, because we celebrate certain things on certain days.
So do we need to make a motion to open up the public hearing?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, can I have the motion, please?
This is so controversial, or so many people want to talk about it.
Yep, I'll make the motion. Okay, the motion's being made by me. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
That the Community Consolidated School District Board of Education meeting be opened on this day, March 14th, 2022, for a public hearing on the school holidays for 2023 school year, and the secretary should record the time as 8:57 p.m. Did you put 56?
I put 58.
Oh.
Okay, go ahead.
Is there anyone in the community that's up here to speak? Okay, with that, do we have a motion to close? Oh, we need a roll call for the, sorry.
Don't skip my job.
All right, all right.
Lang.
Aye.
Mencia.
Aye.
Petrielli, aye. Reed.
Aye.
Sager.
Aye.
Schumacher.
Aye.
And Espino.
Aye.
And the motion.
Okay, now I'll ask, is there anyone from the public here to speak? With that, do we have a motion to close this public comment?
I move that we close this discussion.
Reading resolution 2.
Pardon me? You want to make it? Go ahead and make it.
No, just gotta read the, you gotta read,
Read the resolution 2, Margot.
And, look,
it's right there in the,
One.
somebody
one.
else give it.
Let's scroll down.
I don't have it in front of me. I can't read that.
I'll
far.
do it. I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
All right, motion was made by me, seconded by Patty, that the Community Consolidated School District 59 Board of Education meeting be closed on this date, March 14th, 2022, for a public hearing on modifications to the school, for the school holidays for the 2022-2023 school years, and that the secretary shall record the time as 8:59 p.m.
I'll second it.
Already seconded.
Oh.
roll call, please.
Mencia.
Aye.
Petrielli, aye. Reed.
Aye.
Sager.
Aye.
Schumacher.
Aye.
Espino.
Aye.
And Lang.
Aye.
And the motion passes.
Here's the fun part, action items. Approval of, 11.0, approval of resource allocation for the 22-23 school year.
I will do it. Be it resolved that on the 14th day of March 2022, the Community Consolidated School District 59 Board of Education approved the following resource allocation plan for the 22-23 school year to increase the staffing allocation by 12 FTEs for programming and enrollment needs, 3 FTEs for strategic plan needs, 9 FTEs for absorbing NSSEO staff, and 15 for new staffing needs as outlined in the motion.
I'll second.
Questions, comments? Do we want to talk about the absorbed NSCO staff? Kind of how that worked, how that came about?
Sure. So as we evaluate our staff, it's always important to look at where we contract out through NSSEO. If it creates a situation where we have full-time staff working solely within our district, it is typically in our best interest to then employ those staff members directly as opposed to contracting through NSSEO. So we worked collaboratively with NSSEO to look at our OT and our PT positions, and it was recommended that we are going to employ them directly ourselves and open up positions as needed. So we will have those positions as District 59 employees and no longer contract through NSSEO for those positions.
Is this forever, or is it just for this year?
No,
Because
it'd
it
be-
seems to me we've done this before, but it's been on a temporary basis. Now, are you talking about permanently, or?
This is a permanent change of employment, yes.
Permanent basis.
And
Yes.
wasn't it the case that the other NSSEO members had it structured this way? We were the outlier?
Correct.
Any other questions, comments?
So my only question was, I'd like to highlight the amount of our future budgets we're putting into this effort, because this is money that we are putting directly into education, right? These are teachers who are going to be in the classrooms with the students. And so, Ross, can we get a rough idea of how much this costs?
Absolutely. We'll start with the NSSEO staff, that's 9 FTEs. We estimate that to be an actual cost savings of between $150,000 and $200,000 when you factor in administrative fees, efficiencies, etc. In terms of the new FTEs for certified staff, and we have 3 ESP staff on that list as well, we're looking at just around $2 million.
And that's per year.
Annually, yes, annually.
That factors in base salaries and benefits.
So I just wanted to highlight, it's a big investment, but we expect it to pay off.
Yes, it is a major investment that I think we should fully appreciate and acknowledge. I think it's taking community resources and applying them to what Dr. Zager said, directly where they matter most, which is working with students and our community. So we fully support the needs of this staffing plan, but recognize that moving forward, we want to maximize efficiencies of all staff.
And I think we can also say that in addition to directly supporting education, this moves us one step further towards the equity piece so that we're ensuring that all our students across the district have the same access to our resources.
Yep. Roll call?
Petrielli, aye. Reed?
Aye.
Sager?
Aye?
Schumacher?
Aye.
Espino?
Aye.
Lang?
Aye.
And Mencia?
All right.
And motion passes.
Okay. 11,
Can I just pause for a second and say thank you? This doesn't happen in all districts. All districts are not in a position to be able to, number one, afford to do this. And not all boards are positioned to be in such great support of really making this monumental of an investment in additional FTEs for our students. So I just want to acknowledge that and say thank you, because this will make a significant difference for everyone, all stakeholders. So thank you.
Yes. Thank you. 11.0, approval of holidays for the 2022-23 school year. Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion. Whereas a public hearing was held on March 14th, 2022 to meet the requirement in section 24-2 of the school code to designate President's Day for the Lincoln's birthday holiday, November 22nd, 2022 for the Columbus Day holiday, and November 23rd, 2022 for the Veterans Day holiday. Now therefore be it resolved that on the 14th day of March 2022, the Community Consolidated School District 59 Board of Education, in accordance with the provisions of the Illinois School Code, designates the following days as holidays for negotiated contracts and administrative non-negotiated employees for the 2022-2023 fiscal years.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Any questions or comments? Roll call?
Reed?
Aye.
Sager?
Aye.
Schumacher?
Nay.
Espino?
Aye.
Lang?
Aye.
Mencia?
Aye.
And Petrielli, aye. And the motion passes.
Item 11.03, approval of student transportation services, contract extension for Grand Prairie and rates for 2022-2023. I'll make the motion. Whereas the current contract terms agreed to in March 2017 does not have a provision for pricing for the 2022-2023 school year, be resolved, the Garden Prairie transit contract shall be extended for the period from August 1, 2022 through July 31st, 2023 at a 9.75 increased rate over the 21-22 school year rates.
Second.
Any questions or comments? I just want to say that, you know,
Thank you to the
yeah.
student. Yeah.
I just want to add that, you know, this is something Ron worked hard on to get our rates down low, knowing how much they had increased salaries, price of equipment and other things to get this low rate is a nice thing, be a good savings long term. Because of COVID, we were able to extend the contract. Normally we would have gone out to bid for it, but because of COVID, we're allowed another year to extend the contract. And then next year we'll be going out for bid, and hopefully we can see some good numbers again next year. But I don't know with the gas prices. Anybody else? Roll call?
Sager.
Aye.
Schumacher.
Aye.
Espino.
Aye.
Lang.
Aye.
Mencia. Petrielli, aye. Reed.
Aye.
And the motion passes.
11.04, approval of student transportation services contract extension for first student and rates for 2022-2023.
I will read the motion. Whereas the current contract, is this the same thing?
It's just,
It's the same except for two
Yep, that's
things.
the right one.
Okay. The current contract term agrees to in March 2017 does not have a provision for pricing in the 2022-23 school year. Be it resolved, the first student contract shall be extended for the period from August 1st, 2022 through July 31st, 2023 at a 10% increase rate over the 2021-22 rate.
I'll second it.
questions, comments? Roll call?
Schumacher.
Aye.
Espino.
Aye.
Lang.
Aye.
Mencia.
Aye.
Petrielli, aye. Reed.
Aye.
And Sager.
Aye.
And the motion passes.
11.045, approval of award of flooring replacement at Friendship Junior High.
I'll do it. Whereas bids were collected for hardwood flooring by TIPS, and whereas Stalker Construction Management won the TIPS contract, now therefore be it resolved on the 14th of March 2022, the Board of Education of Community Consolidated School District 59 approved the award for flooring replacement work at Friendship Junior High to Stalker Construction Management for $190,323. And sorry. I was just going to say thank you to Ron and particularly to Albert for your work to identify this and lead us to this bid.
Okay.
Any other questions, comments? Roll call?
Espino.
Aye.
Lang.
Aye.
Mencia. Petrielli, aye. Reed.
Aye.
Sager.
Aye.
And Schumacher.
Aye.
And the motion passes.
11.06, approval of John Jay PTO donation to John Jay Elementary School.
I'll do this one. Be it resolved that on the 14th day of March 2022, the Community Consolidated School District 59 Board of Education approves the $1,000 donation from John Jay PTO for purchase of games for indoor recess and playground games such as balls and jump ropes. Be it further resolved that the superintendent shall communicate to the John Jay PTO in writing expressing the appreciation of the members of the Board of Education, and that this donation shall be listed in the official minutes of this meeting.
I'll second that one.
Any questions or comments? Roll call?
Lang.
Aye.
Mencia.
Aye.
Petrielli, aye. Reed.
Aye.
Sager.
Aye.
Schumacher.
Aye.
And Espino.
Aye.
And the motion passes.
Thank the PTO.
Yes, PTOs, yes. All right, 11.07, approval of District 59 Education Foundation $500 donation to Salt Creek Elementary School.
Be it resolved that on the 14th day of March 2022, the Community Consolidated School District 59 School Board approves the donation from the District 59 Education Foundation to Salt Creek Elementary School totaling $500. This donation will be used to support incoming kindergarten students attending Salt Creek Elementary School in the 2022-23 school year. Furthermore, be it resolved that the superintendent shall communicate to the District 59 Education Foundation in writing expressing the appreciation of the members of the Board of Education This donation shall be listed in the official minutes of this meeting.
Second.
Questions, comments? I will add, thank you to the District 59 Education Foundation. There are a bunch of ladies that work really hard and have been able to provide lots of good support for all the schools in our district. So I want to thank them.
So I just had a question. What, it says will be used to support incoming kindergarten students?
Yeah,
Is
so-
that for like the welcoming kits? And
Yeah, like to send whiteboards home with the kids for the summer, some books to send home with them, those type of things, so they can have activities to help prepare them for kindergarten when they start.
Yeah, so when the kindergartners come to their like orientation pre-summer, they get some stuff to take home with them.
Yeah, exactly.
Very nice.
Roll call.
Mencia. Aye. Petrielli, aye. Reed.
Aye.
Sager.
Aye.
Schumacher.
Aye.
Espino.
Aye.
And Lang.
Aye.
And the motion passes.
Item 11.08, approval of collective liability insurance cooperative for property casualty insurance. The CLIC resolution.
I'll do this one. Be it resolved that on the 14th day of March 2022, the Community Consolidated School District 59 Board of Education approves the agreement between CLIC and Community Consolidated School District 59 as presented.
I'll second it.
Questions, comments?
Just the comment is a good cost savings as well, so thank you for pursuing this.
And lowering our deductibles and stuff like that it's a good thing. Roll call.
Petrielli, aye. Reed.
Aye.
Sager.
Aye.
Schumacher.
Aye.
Espino.
Aye.
Lang.
Aye.
And Mencia. And the motion passes.
All right. 12.0, special interest topics, FOIA requests.
Since the last approval by the Board of Education, there have been 10 FOIA requests. All of them have been responded to appropriately.
Thank you, Ross.
Thank you.
We have to move that stand or something like that, because. Yeah. Item 13.0, new continuing business and announcements. We have nothing. Item 14.0, reports of the Board of Education.
I went to 2 chorus presentations, one at Grove and one at Holmes, and they did outstanding. It was so good. It's usually a full day thing that they get to do, and they didn't want to tell the kids they couldn't perform again or that something would be canceled again. So they set this up, and it really was well done. And I heard that Friendships was just as successful, so it was really nice to do that. And contract negotiations are going well. Hopefully we can close that out soon. And those are my 2 pieces of good business.
I want to give an update on the Finance and Facilities Committee meeting we had last Wednesday. We met with the village manager of Mount Prospect discussing a TIF that they are going to be proposing and going out for public comment. It covers a large area of the Mount Prospect area, a very industrial area that is in need of improvement, i.e. there's not fire hydrants and water mains and stuff like that in that area. So it's something that area needs. And hopefully that in the long run, we will see some nice increase in our taxable base for the future when it does come to fruition. So that's item number 1. And then item number 2 is you all read in the Friday update, last week's Friday update, but I don't think the public knows. We have officially paid off the bonds on the Early Learning Center. So now the district only has 1 bond outstanding, which is the $30-some million we issued for the phase 1 and phase 2 of our roofing and HVAC system repairs, and that is due to be paid off in 2028. And with a good 10-year fiscal plan on our facilities, that we will not be going out to bond for a very, very long time in the future. That is the goal. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to add?
So NSSEO, we had our regular meeting. My brain's a little scrambled, like 2 weeks ago, but we also had the Timber Ridge Gym ribbon cutting ceremony. and that was great. They had a bunch of the students there who were very excited about their new fitness area. It's perfect for those students who can burn off extra energy now, play some basketball, and that sort of thing. I also realized I forgot to send out the board, the NSSEO board update last time, so I'll send you two sometime next week. NSSEO has already begun, or has also begun negotiations. We're just starting out, so we're a little behind our negotiations, but those are my two reports.
You know, just a comment, you know, it's funny to thinking about it now that 2 years ago was our last normal meeting, and this is somewhat of a normal meeting tonight. So it's just funny looking in retrospect, all that happened in the past 2 years of Zoom meetings and remote learning and all the things that we went through. So big thanks to everybody that's listening for their flexibility and their empathy and their patience, and for my colleagues here on the board also for your collaboration and empathy and patience the past 2 years, because it's been wild. So
And
we'll
also,
see what happens going forward.
I didn't mean to cut you off, Robert, but also a thank you to you, because I recall how Robert volunteered to interview for a spot on the board when we had openings at that time, and I believe that he began on a Monday and the world had completely changed by like the following Friday. So thank you for your ability to roll with changes.
So on that note, I just want to say we never took a moment to celebrate the effort that staff put into keeping us operating over, especially this last year when we had, you know, hundreds of cases in a week sort of situation. And I don't think people know that the admin members were running to the schools to act as substitutes. And, you know, we had math teachers filling in for art teachers, and I don't think people appreciate the heavy lift that our staff did, teachers, everyone, right? And so I don't think we took a moment to like say, thank you for doing that, and can we just do that? Like, there's no like end to the pandemic, right? So, but we need a moment to celebrate we made it through this insane year.
And before we clap, I want to also.
Giving up all their free periods to
Yeah,
go into substitute.
Yeah, they were covering for each other, and it was just having the next person's back, right?
Yeah.
It was an amazing effort.
And I think the hardest part was the changing. Every few weeks, things were changing, and how people were able to adapt to that and get around that. So yes, this is a moment to be. I think a moment to celebrate. So thank you to everyone.
Yay, teachers.
Yeah, staff, maintenance people. I think everybody.
That's an amazing district.
Yeah.
All staff.
All staff.
Well, I am thrilled to have Dr. Ossel spend more time talking about MTSS and learning than about COVID tonight. So I am very glad to have her back where she needs to be.
So with that, do we have any other reports for the Board of Education? Can I have a motion for closed session?
I'll make the motion.
Go ahead, Robert.
Oh, you sure? Be it resolved that on the 14th day of March 2022, the Community Consolidated School District 59, or District 59 Board of Education recess in a closed meeting for discussion of, to consider information regarding the appointment, employment, or dismissal of an employee or officer per the statute cited, collective negotiating matters between the district and its employees or their representatives, or deliberations concerning salary schedules for one or more classes of employees per the statute cited, to consider a student discipline, residency, transportation matter per the statute cited, or to consider pending litigation per the statute cited.
I'll second it. You're a lawyer. I like the way it's shorter.
Roll call, please.
One moment. Where am I? I'll start with Robert. Robert.
Aye.
Petrielli. Aye. Reed.
Aye.
Sager.
Aye.
Schumacher.
Aye.